Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to you all, whether you are here live or you are joining us after the event. I'm so grateful that you're here. It's fun to spend some time with you. The theme of today's live stream is He My Guy? Finding Mr. Right in 2020. And I'm going to share a little bit about that, and then I'm going to move into question and answer. Feel free to let me know that you're here, say hello, let me know where you're from, and I will go through questions chronologically. So if you've got a question that's already top of mind or that's burning for you, then get it down, because I'll get it answered first. Essentially, I think there's two main things, right, when it comes to a relationship. The first is getting into the right relationship, and the second is being in the right relationship. And the focus of this live stream is really about getting into the right relationship. And the essence of that for me, we've got some hellos coming in from Austria, Ireland, US. Hey, welcome to you all. Thanks for being here. The essence of getting in the right relationship, in my view, is in part at least about not staying in a relationship or not trying to get in a relationship that's the wrong relationship, right? So one of the best ways to have Mr. Right in your life and to be, quote, Mrs. Right in your life is not to be investing time, energy, and money into a relationship that actually isn't going somewhere. Now, that can sometimes be easier said than done, because there are cases where it's not cut and dry, where it needs more time to unfold, where maybe you notice you have some of your own unavailability issues in relationship. And if we just kind of 80-20 it for a little bit, there are huge gains for a lot of us to be made by not trying to make something happen with a guy where it's not really happening, right? So that's where a guy's not really consistent with you, number one. Number two, he's not taking any initiative. Number three, you don't trust him, and that's not just to do with your own trust issues. Number four, he's not even clear that he wants to be in a relationship, and that's actually impersonal to you. So if any of those things are true, not consistent, not initiative, not wanting to be in a relationship, not ready for a relationship, then I'd be curious as to why you're actually spending time there. A few hellos. Hey to Sweden, San Francisco, New Zealand, Canada, California. Hello to you all. Poland, Germany, Berlin, and Ireland. Welcome, welcome. Stockholm and Sacramento, another island. Welcome to you all. Thanks for being here. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that can actually be quite simple. My job really, is to help you and share with you as much as I know, right? I don't know it all. And there's plenty of things that you will always know better for yourself than I could ever know for you or someone else could know for you. But my job is to try and keep it simple. As Einstein said, make it simple, but sort of no simpler than it actually is. And there are some nuances and there are some complexities. But before we kind of get into nuances and complexities, I just want to start with some of the simplicities, which are, if a guy isn't showing up with consistency and initiative, and he wants a relationship impersonally to you, and also personally actually wants a relationship with you, then the vast majority of stuff that isn't that, I don't imagine that it's going anywhere. Right? Now, if a guy wants a relationship with you, how would you know that? Well, he would declare it to you on more than one occasion. Right? So there's a subset of relationships I see where the guy is kind of ongoingly lukewarm. Maybe he's a little bit on the breadcrumb side. Maybe he was, the relationship was progressing and then it's dropped off. And the sooner that you're able to bring your energy back from that kind of relationship to create space for something else in your life, the better, in my experience. One of the challenges that you might have, and I've heard this a lot from, clients and girlfriends, or, friends who are girls, is, okay, well, the right guy isn't showing up, right? And I've been trying and I've been practicing and I've been showing up and I've been dating and I've been kind of doing everything I can on my side of the fence. So the right guy isn't showing up. Should I just be kind of accepting perennial singleness? Should I be accepting having no kind of intimacy or sexual contact in my life? Like, what do I do? If there's something that comes along that's really like a starter and not the actual main course that I'm looking for, what do I do about that? And I just want to acknowledge that can be a tricky situation, because we all have needs for love and connection and intimacy and sensuality and touch. And so that is a difficult situation, What's also true is that if you start to get intimate with someone, or you have them in your life, even if in your head you're saying, yeah, I'm clear that they're not my person, for most of us that kind of gets confusing, right? Because we start to bond, we start to have oxytocin running, all sorts of things. You can bond with people that aren't good for you, and it's really hard. You probably had this experience to break that bond, right? So that's where I'm more of a fan of actually kind of remaining a little bit more on the abstinence side, remaining more on, I'm going to keep the space open for the right thing. And I might get creative about how I meet my connection needs. I may go out more. I may go out with a wing person so that we're having fun whether we meet someone or not. I might increase the number of dates that I'm going on. I might get some of my touch needs met through girlfriends or massage or contact improvisation or body work or having more pets or pet sitting my friend's pet. You can get creative about that. I think that's normally better than actually putting someone into your life and keeping them there when if I'm honest, this isn't really going anywhere and I'm kind of using it to meet some of my needs, but then maybe I'm cheating myself of the full enchilada, the big burrito, the thing that we all want, which is actually a full-blooded relationship. And I say the thing that we all want. I just want to be clear. You may not want that, and that's absolutely fine. But in sort of gross-orienting generalization, most of the people that hang out on this channel, they want a relationship and they want to make something happen, and they're curious why maybe that isn't happening. Now, can a guy be your guy and not declare that to you, right? You might say, well, maybe I'm dating an introverted guy who doesn't really tell me that much about what's going on in his inner world, or maybe I'm dating someone that's really shy and doesn't, tend to declare his hand. All those things can be true. I've sometimes been that guy back in the day. If that's really the case, then at a certain point, you might have to put a conversation on the table in a light way and say, hey, I'd just like to check in on what this is and where we're going. Any of you that have been working with me for a while, you'll know I'm a fan of these kind of, these threshold conversations, right? The conversations that actually either up level or downshift the connection. And oftentimes we don't want to have those conversations because we won't want to risk downshifting the connection, right? But there is no reward without risk, right? So relationship is risk. Relationship is risk. Being with someone, even someone that you absolutely have your heart set on and vice versa, it's risk. You're going to get hurt. There's going to be difficulties. Challenges are going to come up. So there's no such thing as a risk-free relationship, right? Just to kind of get a bit sober about that. And if we kind of run the cost-benefit risk analysis, for most of us, the bigger risk is that we get the rug pulled out from under us, thinking that something is happening with someone when actually it's not there. Right. So even if those conversations are difficult, even if I would feel completely rejected right now if this guy says, yeah, I don't see this longer term, I want to encourage you to be with and risk that feeling of rejection in the short term so that something in the long term is actually possible and you're starting to build on more solid ground. The other thing I'll say is that as guys, we're not always amazing at knowing where we stand. Right? Sometimes we aren't really clear that we think we're available for relationship and we're not. So sometimes these conversations also sharpen us up and get us, sometimes with something to push up against, we actually start to notice what's more real for us. Where do we see this going? Right? I've often felt saddened because I know if I'm sitting around with a bunch of guys and they're talking about relationship or they're talking about a woman that they're seeing, we might get the real truth about how they feel in that relationship within a number of minutes, something that you've been waiting for weeks and months. And that's often because that conversation hasn't really been broached. The right guy doesn't become the wrong guy because you want to be serious about where the relationship could go. Now, this isn't day one or day two. I think all of these things, sobriety, right? My flagship boring word, good old sobriety, not too much, not too little. So you don't want to be having this conversation on the first date necessarily, but you don't want to be having it after, 9, 12 months and you have no idea that where things are going. So as a guy, you can always say, hey, I don't quite feel ready for that. I'm loving connecting with you. Can we loop back on that conversation? That's fair. But I think if it's like, oh, this was going amazing. I totally thought you were my woman. I was foreseeing being with you for the rest of my life. But how dare you bring up the conversation about where this is going? And because of that, I actually want to completely downshift the relationship. I just don't think that's real. Or if that was ever real for someone, I don't trust that they're actually in their masculine integrity and really know what's what. So there's some starter thoughts. I'm going to jump in here and see if we've got any questions. Thanks for all the hellos. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping that this is a time that has mostly been able to work for people, certainly across North America and Europe. I apologize a little bit to Asia because it's not really Asia o'clock right now. Hi to Jersey City. Another 5-hour live stream. No, I might not be going for 5 hours today. I got a little bit carried away last time, but we'll see how we get to. My best to answer them. Monica today, Jack, smiley face. The classic hot and then disappearing, not even cold. Then thought so much about you, then let's meet, then missing in action. You got it, smiley face. Told him off. It feels damn good. Well, good on you for kind of taking your stand. I'm loving this. Yeah, it wasn't even hot and cold. It had gotten more cold than cold, somewhere between freezing and non-existent. Good, and I want to encourage you to feel, any of you to feel more confident in taking your stand in these situations, right? You don't necessarily have to go telling a guy off. You can just take your stand, name what's true for you, name what's available for you, and focus on what it is that you do want to attract into your life. Hey to Switzerland. I've answered all your questions before you asked them. All right, brilliant. Thanks very much. See you next week. Hello from North Carolina. Hey, Anne, love your work. Thanks so much. Hello in Berlin and Miami, Virginia Beach. Thanks a lot. You're welcome. I made it clear I'm looking to be in a relationship. What is an appropriate time to give him to respond? Again, I would really encourage you to dial into your own intuition, because that's going to be more powerful. Every situation has its uniqueness. You could ask him, like, what are you thinking is an appropriate time to respond? Like, when can I expect to hear from you? I think it has some relationship to how long you've probably been together. And it doesn't stop you when a guy's in that kind of like, oh, let me come back to the table. It doesn't stop you really kind of going and living your life, right? If a guy isn't clear, hey, I really want to be with you, I don't know if you have to be in an exclusive kind of orientation to him. I mean, again, it's what sort of serves you in that situation. I'd also be mindful, where's the guy at? Has he got lots of work travel coming up, etc.? But I'm thinking for most people, maybe we're talking weeks, a week or weeks rather than months would probably be my gut feel, unless the guy is communicating something like, yeah, I'm overseas, or I'm, taking care of my mother, or, my kid's going through a real hard time right now. So I would expect him to be communicating something like that. But I don't think you want to rush a guy. I think it's good for guys to come to the truth and to be able to communicate that to you. And sometimes that does take a little bit of sobering up. If a guy needs, 6 months to work out if he wants to go on a date with you, then yeah, that's something different. Should I just disappear and go no contact after all? Or should I talk about it? I'm quite a fan of when you go no contact, of giving a succinct communication, right? Because you might also be making a request in that communication to say, hey, I'm going no contact, and I actually don't want contact from you, either until I reach out or for the next X months. And that way, at least you're kind of clear. You're kind of taking your standard of making an authentic communication. It doesn't take that long to write a few sentences in a text. So I don't think it's not like, oh, well, I'm giving all this energy to this guy that wasn't even worth it. I think you're just kind of setting the tone for what feels true to you. What I'm not a fan of is trying to have huge debrief conversations about a relationship that never really got going, right? So if you've only been on a few dates and now you want to kind of sit down with a guy and have like a massive debrief, that might not really be appropriate. I sometimes use the analogy of, I'm a soccer guy. It's like, if there aren't really players on the pitch, we can't really make a commentary. So why are we now having like an at-length talk about something that never really got off? You might have a lot of feelings. You might feel betrayed. You might feel a ton of things. I'd probably say take them to, your therapist, coach, or girlfriends. And what we don't really want to do is set you up for more pain for something that's never actually going to show up in your life. Hi, how you doing? I'm great, thank you. I've just come off fasting. I might share a bit more about that later. My boyfriend is not snow, is feeling for me in sex. You're going to have to rephrase that, because I'm not quite sure what you're asking, and I want to make sure I'm answering the right question. Evening, Jack from England. Yay to England. Thank you for all your advice. Such a huge help. I feel in control at the moment, and I'm able to stop the breadcrumbing early on. I find guys, especially online dating, so flaky. Yes, I'm glad that you're making that discernment. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to the flakiness. You know, it kind of actually runs probably in both directions at times. And I'm hoping you have more substantive connection in your life. Hey, Mimi. Hope Oakland's good. I'm working on my scrolling skills here. I'm glad I'm reading your mind. Clayton Olson, Jackie boy, what's up, brother? Looking good, man. Hey, buddy. Thanks for dropping in. If any of you haven't checked out Clayton's channel, he's my teaching and business partner. I'll link it under this video at the end. Julie Taylor, hi, Jack. I find a lot of the dates I go on lack sexual tension / chemistry. I try to flirt, but they don't tend to respond. It's like having a conversation with a friend. Is this my fault? That's a great question. I don't think it's your fault, and I don't think there's any blame there. I'm curious. I'd be really curious to get inside what the guy's experience is. Obviously, I don't really have access to that. You know, so one thing I'd put out there, I don't know if this is true at all, but sometimes when people flirt, it's sort of like they rely on a kind of dominant persona to do that, which actually is a little bit less sort of fully themselves. So that can be something to pay attention to. I know I've been with people where suddenly it's sort of like this other person kind of comes online and is sort of kind of being sexual, but it doesn't feel very calibrated to what is actually maybe happening in the conversation. Generally, if you're being flirtatious, I'd encourage you to be fun and playful and light and humorous with it, because most people can respond to that, whether they're picking up and they actually want to return the more sexual side of the flirtation. I'd also maybe encourage you, I don't know if you ever go out with girlfriends, and that you kind of go to places where you might meet people, and maybe you can get like a third person witnessing on what might be going on. It's like having a conversation with a friend. Yeah, I mean, some guys, they start there, right? And then if they work out that they're interested, they kind of escalate. I don't know that every guy is good at flirting. I'm not sure. I have curiosity, though. How do I know if a guy is real? Online dating, new into the relationship, and asks for money. I would just can that. Why, as a guy, am I asking you for money? Like, what is that about? Unless you and I are in an actual relationship that, you know, has been going for some time, and there's some very specific kind of need that is appropriate to where we're at in relationship, there's nothing in dating that I think is appropriate about asking for money. So anything like that for me is just, you know, it's a bright scarlet flag, and I would be walking away from that. So, and that goes in both directions, because I've seen it where women say, oh, you know, and then I asked this guy for money, and then he did give me some stuff. I'm like, why is that stuff happening in dating? You know, dating, yeah, there might be a question about who's paying the tab for dinner or a date, but I don't think there's any other money that is being transacted. And I think we want to be well down into a relationship until something like that is actually appropriate. And hey, it's one thing for me to say, hey, you know, we've been, you know, dating for a while, I'm a boyfriend and girlfriend, and look, and, you know, I know you've been on this trip, and I would love to, you know, pay for part of it or buy you a new swimsuit or whatever it is. That's very different than me saying, hey, I'm asking you to give me money. Yeah, I'm not down with that. Why don't you tell us what these guys say? Like, I'm keeping her on the back burner. Why don't you tell us what these guys say? Like, I'm keeping her on the back burner. I think you're asking that in relation to when I was saying, like, if I get together with a bunch of guys, and yeah, there can be some. I don't know if there's that exact wording, but there can be some sense of like, I'm not treating this as particularly serious. That's the thing that I think the distinction would be, versus often when it is more serious, there's a little bit more like vulnerability and emotionality that's connected to it, because it's like, wow, I feel more at risk because I actually want this to go somewhere, and therefore there's more risk involved, rather than, yeah, I'm seeing this as a bit more easy come, easy go. It's fun. I like it. I like connecting, but I don't really see it as full-on relationship material. I think that's the main distinction I see there. Hi, Jack. You helped me in your last stream. Turned out that he kept flirting with me and said to hang up together, but his ex came today and I saw her. I know what's going on. I ran away. I'm sorry. That's difficult. It's difficult when guys are kind of crossing with exes. And yeah, I mean, maybe you got to that place now, but as a general rule, definitely a fan of and this isn't always clear cut and possible, but people coming to the table where they've got kind of like clean energy in that way, where it's not like they're still figuring out the thing that they were in, or they want to get back with their ex, or they're still really grieving it. Any of those situations, I would be wary, because it's harder generally for the guy to really know where he stands, right? We all know about this thing called an emotional rebound, and we're all pretty bad at actually knowing it when we're in the middle of it, right? That's my experience, myself historically included there. So yeah, ideally you want someone to go and finish their business. Now, where that gets difficult is you're like, but I want him to know that I'm really like into it, and I don't kind of want to lose out to this other person from maybe lack of interest. I think you can make a really clear communication with someone and say, hey, I really like you, and I really would like to be in a relationship with you, and I want to be in a relationship with you at a time where that really makes sense and you're fully available for it, and I am too, and I don't think that's the season. So please kind of get your house in order, so to speak, do what you need to do. And when that's happened, call me. We might still be able to remain friends. Maybe we get together periodically as friends, but I'm not going to start crossing into that territory of trying to have an intimate relationship with you when you've still got a whole bunch of energy and attention tied up with something that hasn't come to its natural conclusion, or that you haven't actually had time to process and grieve, really. Even if the relationship was terrible, most of us need to kind of grieve, to let go of the idea of what it could have been, at least. What's your advice for someone who's had toxic relationships in the past, i.e. gaslighting, and developed a hard time opening up their thoughts to people? AKA, what are communication tips for someone? Well, number one, I would take it slow. I'm a big fan of authenticity, and part of authenticity is permission to be exactly where we are, right? We don't generally evolve in life by wishing or pretending that we were somewhere else. It's an old joke, right? Where you ask someone for directions and they say, oh no, you don't want to start here, you want to start over there. And a lot of us, in our own lives kind of try and do some version of that, right? So if you've had a hard time in previous relationships, you're going to want to take it slow. The right person is probably going to be able to attune to that and get it. Like, yeah, maybe you've had a hard time. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more tricky for you to trust. Maybe you're going to have to take it a little bit more slowly. And that's okay. I think when it comes to, opening up, I think sometimes it's easiest to open up about positive experiences, right? So what are you excited about in your life? What's been going well? What do you want to celebrate? What was a mini win at work, or with your child, or in your family, or with a hobby? You just got a new personal best at the gym. Start by sharing the stuff it's less vulnerable often to share the positive emotions, right? Joy, happiness, celebration. The next stage from that is then to just gently start to share things that might be difficult for us. And, that could just be a super small thing, right? Like my coworker is kind of frustrating me, and maybe I just share something about that. You sort of test the water, and, gradually you might find that you are able to communicate more. There's also a way that you can hold your communication, which is, it's not like, wow, I told you this thing, now you have some kind of power over me. It's right. There's a sort of a gift in our own authenticity and vulnerability, right? That sometimes if we go to a place and share something, we don't necessarily have to make that about, this relationship needs to make sure it goes somewhere now. It can just be that there's a sort of rightness and completeness to actually just sharing at a time where we're at, and if that's too much, then it's too much. I'd also encourage you to get some support, professional support. I think that can really help you open up territory that might be difficult to do on your own. I'm just going to give you a couple of invitations here. So I have a free guide. It's called the Real Freedom Guide. I'm just going to post that link. You can just click that. It does two things. It's the fastest way for you to get on my email list, and it's also a free guide about how to be more yourself, how to be the real you, how to be the authentic you. So I've just posted that into the comments. And also, I don't know if this is going to work because it's got my name, Jack Butler, in it, and normally YouTube changes it. But I've just posted. If you don't follow me yet on Instagram, I'm kind of doing more on Instagram now, so I'd love to have you over there with me. My Instagram is Real Jack Butler, Real REAL Jack Butler. I've just posted it there. It may have broken off Jack Butler because it thinks it's my name on YouTube, but Instagram.com/Real Jack Butler. I do mini segments over there that are more day-to-day that I can't do here on YouTube. When guys are confused, just run away. Crumbs are crumbs. Yep, crumbs are crumbs. Mr. Right is never going to give you confusion or breadcrumbs. Yep, absolutely. Mimi says, men prioritize mission over partnership, but you talk about polarity. So isn't a man's mission as important or real without having a soft place to land with a woman on a regular place? Isn't a man's mission as important or real without having a soft place to land with a woman on a regular basis? So to your first statement, yeah, I do think that a lot of guys prioritize mission over partnership, and plenty of guys also don't. I'm a fan of the truth there, right? I think if a guy is really trying to make a relationship his priority and it's actually to the detriment of his mission, that's where it's a problem. I think for a lot of guys, they find the more, right? The more they're on their mission, the more they actually want to dial into a relationship, and that can support them on their mission, and that's awesome, right? That's awesome for a guy, and that's probably awesome for you as well. And yeah, absolutely. I think when guys are really, working hard, and it's probably not just guys, but let's just say in this instance, guys are really working hard on their mission. Yeah, I do think that it's important from that place of doingness to have a place of beingness, what I think you're calling like a soft place to land. It just may not be that's shows up as quite the same priority for him as the thing that he's actually wanting to manifest in the world. But I think if you're able to offer that to a guy on a regular basis and he wants it and values it and you do, I think that's a completely beautiful thing. And, yay to that aspiration. Hey to Auckland, New Zealand. Was there in December. Cool place. Hi, Jack from Germany. Welcome. You rock. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know about the drop-off guy. Yeah, you're welcome. I know some of that from previous experience. And I don't know that drop-off guy sometimes knows that he's about to become drop-off guy, and that can make it all the more confusing. But as we often say on this channel, actions speak louder than words. So when that is happening, you've got to really tune into the reality of it. If someone has been texting, calling for a month, but not initiating meetup, should I just drop it? Yeah, probably. You could make a quick communication that says something like, hey, if it's true for you, I've enjoyed texting with you, or, hey, thanks for the time we spent texting. I'm really interested in face-to-face meetups. Like, I'm dating with a view to, seeing people in person. So if you want to take me on a date or make something happen, let me know. But other than that, I don't anticipate continuing to text. So I think they're your two options. I think if you drop it and you never hear anything again, you sort of have your answer. You can also just make that communication just to make sure, because sometimes guys don't get it. But I think normally it's because they are in I want a sort of pen pal or connection or hookup or just kind of light textual intercourse, as opposed to something that's like actually going to go somewhere. So it sometimes just sobers men up to have that reflection. And again, I'm not making that guy wrong, right? If you want to have pen pal, there's plenty of women that are up for having that kind of pen pal connection. It's just frustrating if you actually want to be in a relationship. Hey, from Phoenix, breadcrumbs in Boston. That sounds like it should be in the cinema. 4:30 a.m. in Adelaide. That's dedication to growth. My word, that is. Yes. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that. I'm rarely see the light of the 4:30 a.m. I hope it's improving in Australia. Hi, Jack. I just started connecting with a guy who lives in a neighboring country, 3 hours by bus. We haven't met in person yet. When should a woman go to his town for a visit? I'm a fan of getting to that point sooner than later. Obviously, make sure you do it in a way that honors your safety needs. Meeting in public place and all that. Let other people know where you've gone, etc. I'm also curious, do you have to go to him, right? Because if we're in this orientation of wanting a guy at least have a minimum effective dose of initiative, maybe he can come to you. I've had these situations where people are relating with a guy in another country, and he's in touch all the time, and then he's maybe starts to even talk about something like we could be serious. Maybe then he starts to lay like a marriage or something on the table, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, this guy hasn't even figured out how to get to be in person with you. Do you really think he's going to be figuring out a lot of things for you in the future? So I'm sometimes happy for people to hold a bar for a guy to kind of jump over, right? And in the sense of like, hey, if you want to come and be on a date with me, you kind of got to come to me. Like, mostly it's probably fairer game for the guy to do that, to show initiative. It's probably, maybe a little bit safer for him in some ways to be able to do that. So yes, I'm a fan of in person as soon as possible. And I'm curious if you might put it back in his court and say, hey, I would love for you to come and take me out on a date, in my hometown. Doing a bit of scrolling here. A little bit behind the curve here. All right. Hey, Jack, why is it almost exclusively women here listening to you? In my experience, men also want to be in an emotionally secure relationship. So on the latter point, yeah, I think when guys are oriented to wanting to be in a relationship, absolutely. There's probably about 10%. They don't tend to comment that much, but I can tell from the back end of analytics that there's 10 and sometimes into the low teens of guys that are the percentage of who watches this channel. And interestingly, guys watch for longer. So that's been cool to know. The main reason, well, I think there's probably 2 or 3 main reasons. So number one is that I've oriented this channel more towards women. So a lot of my titles are about, finding the guy or emotionally unavailable men. I think the second thing is that, and I think and hope this is starting to change, but historically, women are just more oriented to relationship help and education than men. So there's just a bigger space that women are in. Yeah, I think thirdly, there's a lot of other spaces that guys are going to online that are in and around relationship content that aren't to do with being in an emotionally secure relationship. Men go their own way and those sorts of things. So, those guys occasionally come over and comment on my channel, but this is not really a sort of obvious place for them to be hanging out. All right. After 1 year serious relationship, I told him we should take a break and go into contact until he figures out. How long should I wait until I move on? Figure out what the next steps are and finalize the separation. So I think when you say finalize the separation, you mean his separation with someone else. So in that instance, it can be tricky, but I would encourage you to move on now, because the thing that you had, whatever was constellated, if he was still in figuring out a separation, what you had isn't actually available, right? It's sort of like that needs to dissolve fully. And if something in the future can resurrect, it should do so on a new foundation and have a new foundational energy, in my view. So I would actually encourage you to move on. Now, I know it's difficult. You're like, well, yeah, but I still kind of want this thing to happen with this guy. We call that leaving your door open, and some people find it easier to leave their door open and lead their life. Some people, it's like that door open feels like they're not really living their life. So you have to find a balance there that works for you. But I would really use it as a time to go focus in on your own life, your own dreams, missions, passions, hobbies, everything that you want to bring more fully into your life. And that might include dating, right? It might include other connections, because statistically speaking, that guy doesn't necessarily come for the second round with you, So unless you feel really not just, my heart wants it, but kind of like deep intuition that this really is your guy, and therefore you're happy to, quote, take your sign in and not be kind of dating other people, I would be a little bit wary of that. So I'm a fan of moving on now, letting the thing die, and then he wants to come back into your life. You can assess it at the time. Has something really changed in his world? Has he really cleaned up shop? And does it still make sense for you at that point in time? Because timing is really an important part of getting into a relationship. So, we don't know if the stars are going to realign fully. I think you make a communication to say, hey, I kind of only want you to be in touch if something different is actually available. And meanwhile, I'm living my life, because it also lets guys know, like, okay, you're not just an option. You're not just hanging on. And maybe one day I might decide, but maybe I don't. I think it's good for guys to have that respect for, like, you are a precious being that's bringing a lot to a relationship. I don't get to just sort of play games with that. I might have to work hard on myself. I might have to really do the work to grieve and move on and make this separation real, because there's actually something here that I want to pursue. So most guys grow, I think, from doing that. I don't think it's a problem. I dated a guy 18 months ago, says Leanne, and after 2 months, he freaked and said he couldn't give me what I want. We kept in touch over text intermittently, and since Xmas, he's shown up frequently over text. To be continued. That's interesting. So 18 months, I mean, that's quite a chunk of time. If he's now still just doing tech stuff, I'm curious about that. Whatever works really, but I'm curious for you as to whether that's kind of tying up energy and attention, and that's really serving you to get more of what you want. When guys have kind of gone in and then gotten freaked out, and then they're not kind of coming back to the table, unless there's some substantive thing, like I'm figuring out a separation, or, I was just really in a bad patch in my own life. I'm curious what would ever change to make that into like a real and viable thing. Jack, it's great that you show your PayPal now. I donated a little money. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks so much. Not much, but maybe others will follow. What you do is so valuable. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will link that under the video when we finished here. But it is, let me put it in here. I think I have this right. If you want to support the channel, I've just posted that PayPal link, and you can do that anytime under any video. But thank you. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. I do want to be putting more attention here in the coming year and years. So the more I'm able to do that and dial back from other things in my business, the more I'm able to do that. So I appreciate it. Flirting is boring. I want to know the real person. Awesome. Men don't always pick up on a flirt either. Yep. Too true. He said he's worked on himself, but he's sticking with texting. I mean, I'm curious about that. Like, each to their own, and a guy has a right to stick to texting. But I would want him to be initiating some kind of meeting, right? If I freaked out and said, this is kind of too much, or I'm not available for this, then at some point, if we're going to get back into a track of exploring relationship, I think it has to come from my side. And obviously, generally, we kind of like it where there's that sort of initiative from a guy anyway. And maybe he's sensitive. I get it. I'm a super sensitive guy, but there's something that feels a little bit fragile about just saying I'm sticking with texting. Like, it doesn't make me think, oh, here's a guy that is solid in his life and is ready to bring the right woman into his life for a real relationship. It has a very different vibe in the way that it's landing in me. Mel Bell, glad I could catch you live. Awesome, welcome. A lot of stuff here about people saying they've experienced online scams. Yeah, I mean, just from a developmental perspective, discerning online scams is a great way to get more sober, right? Is to really listen, trust your intuition, listen to red flags, not project an idea of who someone could be or should be, but to really notice, who are they? Who am I actually dealing with? Is this really appropriate to this stage of dating? So all of that, in my experience, people who are good at noticing this is a scam, and not doing it just because some people can notice that because they're just super skeptical ongoingly about life. But being skeptical ongoingly is normally just, I have a lot of doubt and anxiety in my head, and that kind of runs me. And that's really not the best place to live from, in my experience. But if you can learn how to root that stuff out, it also helps you. It's the same muscle, I think, at least it's related to the muscle of, can I notice what's actually here? Can I stop creating a fantasy? Can I stop creating a story about my past, about who I am, why I am the way I am? who this guy is, where this is going. It just sort of takes all that stuff out of the equation and allows you to be a little bit more objective. And a lot of what I'm trying to teach people on this channel is how to bring some more sobriety and some more objectivity to your dating in service of actually investing in the right places. Alrighty. Do you believe men who know they're having consistencies with committed relationships should maybe realize they need to only approach women who are happy with casual relationships? That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, you're asking me what do I believe? The question for me really is, do you want to do something about it? Right? You might be a guy who notices, yeah, maybe I've been inconsistent, or I'm prone to that, or I get super buried in my work, or I have avoidant attachment and I haven't done anything about it. All of that can be true. I don't think that should stop you being in a relationship, but it means that you need to bring that awareness and be working it. I think if you're not working it, that's where it's a problem. The reality is these guys are out there, and my interest is more in helping you orient towards that than in trying to, I'll support any guy that wants to work on something, awesome, but you're not going to stop that being out there in the marketplace, right? That's going to still be there 1, 3, 5, 10 years from now. So that's why it's useful to work on your side of the fence of, what do I need to do to make sure that when I notice a guy is inconsistent in a way that's not going to breed a consistent connection, what do I need to do to take good care of myself, right? And probably I need to downshift that connection, or we need to be in some real dialogue about that and maybe getting some help, but we need to see some energy from his side that he actually wants that kind of help. How to tell him to tone it down without offending him? Well, most things in life that are difficult to communicate, ideally, and sometimes I'm absolutely terrible at this, but I've also gotten a lot better at it, and particularly if you're not triggered, is to be able to talk from your heart, right? Because your heart is the thing that will guide you being tuned and sensitive and caring in the way that you communicate with someone. So if you're saying, hey, I like you, and sometimes this is a little bit too much for me, could we take it a bit slower? I think the right guy will be able to hear that. And if a guy really has a big problem with that, he might not be your guy. And by the way, just to challenge a little bit, your job isn't to not offend me, right? If your job is to take care, but your job is to not necessarily not offend me. You could say something in the most caring, heart-connected, authentic way, and I could still take offense, right? Because the way you said it reminds me of my ex-girlfriend, or it reminds me of my mother, or I have a bruise and a wound, and you're poking it and you didn't even realize. So I'm saying that because there are times where I know the women are working really hard to make sure that they don't offend or upset or have a guy experience something bad. But the reality is that is also part of life and relationship. And you don't want to sort of emasculate a guy in your mind that actually, a guy can probably be robust with some of these things. It may sting, he may feel rejected, he may feel all sorts of things, but your job is to not stop a guy feeling things. Your job is to show up the best you can, communicate the best you can, and bring your care. And beyond that, you can be what we call available for impact. And available for impact means that you might notice you've said something and it's had a reaction in him, and that you can hang around and hear that, hey, when you said that to me, I got completely offended. And you can hear him say that without having to then go into guilt or shame yourself. Right? Availability for impact means I'm actually not responsible for the impact. I do my best with my intention, how I show up, but then I'm available for the impact. If I accidentally stirred your wound, I can be sorry, I can apologize, I can hear you about what that's like, but my job is never not to accidentally tread on your wounds, because we all have them, and I don't want to treat you like you're this sort of dainty guy that I always have to be on eggshells to talk things to. Much better that you can communicate directly with care and then hang around. And if there's anything that needs to be cleared up, be available for that impact, but available, not responsible. If you offend someone, if you're going to guilt about that, I would like to clear that up and nix that and actually shift it, that you don't have to be responsible that someone feels offended. This is, by the way, it's a different way of orienting than a lot of kind of mainstream cultural convention, right? Because if I said, oh, you'll never guess what, Vicky completely offended Andrew, and how dare she? my sense is that in authentic culture, we kind of move that on its head, and we get much more curious about, well, what was going on for Andrew and what was going on for Vicky. But we don't just assume that because Andrew got offended that somehow, offense has this sort of right of critique that other people need to be shamed. I'm just not really down with that. What is your take on feminine, masculine energy? Okay, so I know there's a lot that's out there on this, and a lot of it's pretty good. There may just be some nuances that I would also add. So, I'm a fan of people being true and real to their authentic self. And maybe we could say that plural, authentic selves. Like, it's not like we're just this one sort of singular blob. There's lots of parts of us that can have expression at different times. You might want to work out whether in your sort of true essence you are more masculine and feminine, or feminine, right? And then we get into like, well, what do those words mean? And they're actually, essentially contested concepts, which means that there's not just one right or easy definition of them. But if we say that, we could even just put a little bit of language for a moment. This doesn't capture the whole thing, but we could say like, directive versus receptive. Then, just notice how you're showing up in a relationship. Notice if it feels real to you, right? Notice if you're like, yeah, actually I show up and I'm, domineering or controlling in certain ways, and actually it doesn't feel true to me, but that, is maybe something I learned how to do, or actually, yeah, I really like to be kind of in charge of the direction of the relationship, right? If that's true for you. So I'm a fan of, people not trying to fit in with some archetype that a teacher taught them so much as like what is real and true for you. And the other thing that goes alongside that is we can talk about masculine and feminine defense, right? So masculine defense is when I feel defended, I tend to come on strong and be confronting, right? Feminine defense is I tend to be more disarming and I talk around the truth and I promote harmony, whereas masculine defense tends to say, look, I want the whole truth, right? Just give me the truth, rather than I'm really going to kind of try and protect us staying in harmony and in connection. Now, you could have both of those defenses, neither of them. You can be a man with a feminine defense. You can be a man with a masculine essence and a feminine defense. You can be a man with a masculine essence and a masculine defense. You can, be all variations of those, but just again, notice what's true for you. And then the other thing I'd say is there are some pretty interesting models that talk about relationship to structure, right? Which could be one other aspect of, you might say that the masculine energy is more structured and the feminine energy is more flowy. It's one way of talking about it. But that relationship with structure, you'll find that there are, huge numbers of women that are more structured than a lot of guys, and obviously vice versa. So, you're probably talking about hugely overlapping bell curves. And most people find that, or I invite you to notice, if you do better with someone that has at least as much relationship with structure as you. When that doesn't happen, when a guy doesn't have that, you might find that the relationship starts to lose its polarity, or that you're actually having to step more into your masculine than you would like. So that's something to be aware of. But if you are, as I am, if you're like an artistic, creative guy, you're going to be probably less structured than a guy who's much more of a natural kind of implementer warrior archetype. And I don't think you grow by trying to, pretend that you're something you're not. You might say, oh, that's an energy I want to cultivate more in my life. But there are a lot of women for who their actual real essential energy is a warrioress energy, right? They're really good at chunking things down, getting things done, knowing the kind of right order to do things in, and they're not super creative. That's not necessarily their native way of being in the world. So, all of that to say that if you just see it in this one binary, I think you can sometimes get a little less truth and a little bit more confused. And let's actually allow people to be there in their true expression, and then notice how do those expressions work alongside each other. One other thing to say is we want to have access to our healthy masculine and our healthy feminine, right? And all of us at times will have unhealthy masculine and unhealthy feminine, no matter where our actual essence is, so just acknowledge that, right? You can be a very woman who has a very clear feminine essence, but you might have an unhealthy masculine that rears its head sometimes, and maybe it's your defense, and you come on completely strong and confrontational, and or you become single pointed and workaholic, and it's sort of like this alter ego. So most of us have some version of that we want to look at, and can we have that healthy expression? As we're encouraging men to have healthy masculine, right? We've had a lot about toxic masculine. Hopefully this year is more about the healthy masculine. And as we're encouraging men to be more in touch with their healthy feminine, and we're encouraging everyone to do that, really, what's it like to be in touch with your own healthy masculine, where you feel kind of grounded and solid in who you are, and where you can bring appropriate direction and structure to the things that you care about. It just might not be that if you have a feminine essence, you want to be in that place all of the time. So that's what I got to say on it. My partner and I have planned a romantic evening. Is it okay that we both pay for this romantic evening? Yeah, I'm pretty flexible, flexitarian, both in diet, but I'm pretty flexible about this stuff. It's sort of like whatever works. I think if the guy never pays for you or can't pay for you, that might be a problem, right? But beyond that, it's kind of like whatever works. Now, if you're like, actually, even if we pay 50-50 for a whole lot of things, actually, when it comes to dates, I would love for him to be taking more of that initiative, then, that might be a conversation to have. Some guys aren't clued onto that. I think way back in the day, I don't think I was really clued onto that. So, whatever works. Sometimes you out earn the guy 2, 3, 5x, so maybe you're going to pay for more stuff. But again, we want to know that he's got, ideally, if he's holding down more of the masculine relationship, that he's got some attention on finance, right? He's got some attention on, particularly if we're in a committed relationship, like I'm taking care of that. Even if you're earning more, I'm still taking care of, I kind of know where our accounts are. I know what we need. I know that we're maybe thinking about saving, or we're trying to, build something, buy a house, buy a car, whatever it is, that I've got some attention on that. And I'm not just checked out. I've known relationships where the guy is kind of checked out from the finances and the woman actually has a much better, financial brain, but it sometimes again goes into this kind of depolarizing of the relationship, where the guy is actually not being trustworthy and responsible about financial decisions, and the woman kind of knows that and is increasingly not trusting him, and is then kind of holding it down, but then is also kind of stressed and is also kind of more in her masculine than she wants to be. That's the thing that I would be wary of, as opposed to one-off dates and who's paying for it. Should I just keep it this way, no contact, or should I have the hard conversation? I don't feel like he is a bad person, but it was a bad timing for us, I guess. If in doubt, why not have a conversation, or why not make the communication? I don't know if this is a communication like a 3-line text, or if this is actually sitting down and having a conversation. But if in doubt, because then it's just like, well, I showed up, I did it, and kind of you can move on. It's better, I think, not to be plagued by should I, shouldn't I, just kind of close it off. And if he doesn't show up for it, you have your answer. And you can move on anyway. Anna says, I dated someone for 9 months, many cancellations with our dates. I said goodbye at Xmas, but he is still in touch, but zero action. Should I block him? I feel he's playing games. Yeah, that sounds like a move on situation to me. When guys are consistently canceling dates, right? Unless there's some very good reason for that, right? Like, I don't know, I work for the police and I'm on call or something. But, I can cancel a date and rearrange it, right? But if I'm canceling and I'm not rearranging and I'm not making good communications about that, that doesn't seem like a road to anywhere particularly productive. Ume, I've missed the origination of your point here. Sorry about that. I'm a widow, says Karen, with grown children. Seems the men I meet in my age group are mostly interested in friends with benefit situations and non-exclusive. Why don't older men want to get married? Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. I get a lot of questions from older women kind of saying, what's up with the guys? I can't speak from that vantage point, so I'm not going to pretend to. My imagination and curiosity would include things like men feeling like they've gotten really hurt and that it's kind of not worth it, that they've had bad experiences of marriage, or that they've had long-term committed relationship or marriage, and now they actually just want freedom and they're experiencing that. And we can talk about different ways that the masculine experiences freedom. That there's maybe a more or less mature way to experience freedom, and sometimes the less mature way might just be that you can kind of do what you want, when you want, if you want. And if people haven't had that in their lives, or they haven't had it for 30 years of marriage, they're kind of sometimes prone to that, I think. There's a more mature form of freedom that has to do with integrating constraints and getting like, there's, if we're in an exclusive relationship, there's obviously constraints to that. and it's worth it, and you're not the problem. Like, my freedom is like a more of an internal game, right? And I get that it's not just everyone outside is crowding in on my freedom. So I think some of it's that. I think some of it is, they've had bad divorce settlements, and the finances of it. And I think also sometimes, there's definitely different types of men, right? So there are definitely men that if they, end a long-term marriage, or, unfortunately their partner dies, that they quite quickly get into another committed relationship. So I just want to say there are a bunch of those men out there. And then I think there are other patterns, and I think this also goes for men and women, where it's like they have a long-term committed thing, it goes south, and then it actually takes them quite a long time, if ever, to want to get back into a committed thing, maybe let alone marriage, but just a long-term committed relationship. And I think probably some of that is unmetabolized hurt, or just like, they've had so much pain and frustration that it doesn't seem worth it to them. They would rather have the limitation that being single is to them than the risk of doing that again and magnifying that hurt. I don't know, how many men really go into therapy or coaching or something that can really help them when they've gone through coming out of a long-term marriage. My imagination is that a lot of them don't. And so actually now they're projecting a whole lot of ideas on the women they meet based upon the ex-wife and maybe what was difficult about that relationship for them. So also, as older men, they sometimes have still the ability to date younger women, right? And some of those younger women don't necessarily want to get married or aren't asking that in the same way. So that gives them another kind of way of expressing. But you only need one. So I would focus on the fact that lots of men do want to get remarried, or some men have never married and still open to it. So, keep focusing on what you want. Sarah, hi Jack, I finally caught you live. Awesome. Glad you're here. I'm just scrolling. I'm definitely trying to pick out questions here. Thanks for all the comments, and I love it that you guys are also talking back and forth. For those of you that joined us recently, welcome. Thanks for being here for this live stream, Finding Mr. Right in 2020. If you haven't, I'm just going to put in here, follow me on Instagram, and I'm also going to post again the Real Freedom Guide, which is my free guide. It's ebook. It's a great read. I've gotten lots of good feedback about it. It's rich. It's not just a here's 5 sentences ebook to grab your email. This is a genuine piece of work, and for some people, it's actually it takes a little bit to get into it. So if you want something meaty, I would encourage you to do that. It's also the fastest way to get on my mailing list, which means you're going to hear of perks and other things. That's the place that I release them. I found that when I couldn't pay, they rejected me. Also, you can reach out to the online staff to check him out. I think you're talking about online scams. I've been dating someone for over a month, spent lots of time together. He hasn't asked me if he wants to get in a relationship. How should I bring up the where are we question? Okay, yeah, good question. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Like, it's kind of going well. We've been seeing each other a bunch, but where are we? Obviously, in an ideal world, or in one possible world, he would be broaching that conversation, right? If a guy is really keen to secure you as an exclusive partner, his girlfriend, some variation of that, oftentimes a guy will initiate that conversation. So it can be interesting when he hasn't. Doesn't necessarily mean that he couldn't or won't, but it's just one information point that I think you want to hold on to, that he's not the one that's progressing and deepening and initiating that conversation. So one strategy is, let's let it roll for another month and just see whether he steps into that. And maybe during that time, I'm going to be making zero assumption that this is going somewhere. Maybe I'm even going to be spending time elsewhere, or keeping my dating profiles open, because I'm not making any assumptions, but I'm not sort of jumping in there. Now, if you actually have an intuition, maybe this isn't really going somewhere, right? And you might be saying, well, maybe this isn't going somewhere, so why would I want to invest? I kind of want to cut to the chase. In that instance, you can broach the conversation. Just say, hey, what I would do is I would say, hey, are you up for some time talking about where we are or where this is going, right? Because that way it's not like you're springing on him at a date like, hey, where's this going? Lots of guys appreciate the heads up. They appreciate having some time to think about it, maybe coming to the table with something a little bit more coherent. So I would ask for the permission of the conversation, and I would be very intuitively dialed in as I'm asking to notice, like, what vibes am I getting about that? Does he seem interested in it? Does he not? And then you can let him come back to the table. Now, if he's never tabling that conversation, that's also interesting information, right? So you sort of, if he's not initially leading it and then you suggest it and then he's never bringing it back to the table, you're now starting to gather some good information without him actually having said anything. Now, again, I don't want you to make full assumptions about it. I'm just saying, notice the information that's out there. And as you may have heard me say before, the right guy doesn't tend to become the wrong guy because you asked that question too early. So I wouldn't have too much fear of it, other than, there might be fear that the relationship downshifts, that it's not actually going somewhere. But again, in sobriety and maturity, we want to find that out. We don't just want to leave that to random chance. So I would say, in the second month, if you've been seeing each other, he hasn't been bringing it up, just float. Would you be up for talking about this at a time that works for you? And then kind of see what he brings it back. If he hasn't brought it back within a couple of weeks, maybe you say, hey, I really do want to have that conversation. But you could also just say, I'm noticing it doesn't seem like you're broaching that conversation. And I'm curious if that means that maybe you don't see something more serious here, right? So you could also cut to the chase a little bit in that way. You're not telling him that you know what he means. You're sort of saying, hey, this is the sort of curiosity that I have, and you're putting it into his world. I had to let my former partner go, says Sarah, because his mission took too much time and energy and there wasn't enough left for me. Hard lesson to learn. Yeah, that is tricky. That is tricky. Again, I do think there are plenty of guys that are super mission driven and absolutely show up for their partners and families, right? They tend not to be guys that I think are avoidant, so that it's quite easy for them to turn into the relationship and to want something secure in the relationship. And that can be the kind of thing that is just worth exploring with someone, right? That, because it could also be that there are love languages where for you, the sense that he hasn't got enough time and energy for you is because your highest love language is quality time, and that you're not getting quality time, right? So sometimes it can be good just to be in that conversation, just to find out, like, hey, I'm having the experience that you don't actually have enough energy for this, and I'm not going to make you wrong about that, but it is a point of discernment for me as to whether this is really going to work for me long term. I'm kind of curious about how you feel like you're showing up, if you're showing up in the way that you want to. And yeah, sometimes there isn't enough left over. Sometimes that's a stage of life thing, right? Like if a guy is really building his career and is kind of, not sort of made it in any way, like he's still really, really making his way in the world, sometimes that isn't the time that a guy wants a committed relationship, right? Like he might want connection. Guys often want connection at all stages of development, but he may not really be available to have something meaningful with you. And that can just be a timing thing. That's why it's often better to find, someone that's sort of settled into their career and their life and kind of knowing who they are and knowing what they want and knowing that they want a relationship, rather than, I'm trying to fit a relationship in and around something that isn't necessarily, hasn't yet taken enough form, or I don't really know who I am. I think that guy is hard to partner with. Any advice on online dating or better ways of meeting guys? I might join a triathlon club. Yeah, absolutely join a triathlon club. I still think some of the best ways of meeting guys are offline, right? By following your hobbies and interests, joining groups, going to seminars, getting your friends to introduce you to people. I still think that's an utilized resource. I think sometimes your friends might have a pretty good sense of someone that could be a good fit for you. And if not, you just have fun on a blind date. I think they're kind of fun. You get more used to doing blind dates. When it actually comes to online dating, my advice is to be authentic. My advice is to move it sooner than later into another medium, right? That you can actually have more contact, like in a call or a FaceTime or an in-person meeting. My encouragement is to trust your intuition on time wasters, right? And to nix that, because you don't want to start losing your energy and attention to it. Get feedback on your profile. Online dating is lead generation. It's lead generation for the real thing. It's finding people to actually get into some kind of conversation with. So I think just sort of treat it like that. Sometimes people, they have conversations and like, well, I was so offended he didn't reply, or he didn't do this, or it's sort of like, the online dating isn't that yet. It's sort of like me getting offended by someone who said one time that they wanted to coach with me, and we never actually had a call to explore that, and that I'm sort of frustrated and angry with them that didn't show up, rather than just being like, well, if they wanted it, they can figure that out. If they want to get into connection, they can figure that out, how to do that. A lot of being successful in dating, I think, is actually your attitude and staying turned on to it, right? Like, it's something I want. It's something I'm bringing positive energy to. So anything that is not that, ideally you want to limit it, right? If you're doing online dating, but it's gradually eroding your self-esteem and building your frustration, you either need to shift your attitude or don't engage there and put all your attention somewhere else. I'm a pragmatist and I'm a fan of what works. If something you're putting lots of energy in, enough to test it, and it's not working for you, I would start to reorient that attention and to put it elsewhere. Maybe you need to start hosting some dinner parties, and you invite 2 friends, and then your friends fill the room, but they have to bring guys, or maybe you need to start a class, or if it's not in your area, maybe you need to start, a yoga class and see who turns up, and have the intention that it's going to be half women and half men. I mean, you can get all sorts of creative with this. I'd much rather you did that than just stay stuck on a thing that isn't really working for you. And gradually, your vibration is dropping, the energy you're putting out in the world, it's not even real and authentic to you. You're kind of exasperated. You kind of qualify guys on the first sentence because you've had so much hurt in the past. We want to avoid that, and just realize online dating is definitely challenging. A lot of people don't feel great about it. It maybe isn't the best emergence of our time. I think there's a lot of new micro behaviors that Tinder and like are cultivating that aren't necessarily probably pro-evolutionary behaviors. But that's also just the sort of reality of where things are at. If you aren't meeting enough men, just say hello to more men. I mean, that sounds stupid and simple, but it's like classic sales stuff, right? You're not selling enough. Well, how many people are you putting your offer in front of, right? If you put your offer in front of 10 times more people, you will probably get more sales. In the same way that if you happen after every yoga class, you just say, hey, I'm going to go, whoever is the guy that I feel most drawn to, I'm just going to go and say hello, right? And sometimes that guy will be married and completely unavailable. Fine. But you're just putting yourself into that intention, right? Or if you are in a bar, before you leave that bar, you're going to say hello to someone. Maybe it's the owner of the bar, maybe it's the waiter, maybe it's the guy who's sat on his own at the bar, maybe it's the guy that's with a group of women, maybe, you know what I mean? But you're putting yourself in that energy of, I'm open to connecting, I'm saying hello, I'm smiling. And of course it would be great if the guy did that. But if you're the one that's clear that you want more dates and that's not happening, I'd really look at how open are you to connection, because connection can be all around you. You can walk down a street and feel connected to people and not even say anything, right? It's like, how open are you? How much eye contact are you making? How much engagement are you bringing with people? So that's another thing that you can look at. It's not to do with the tactics of how to do online dating beta. It's more like, what is the way of being that you are bringing into these interactions? Are you bringing yourself? Are you bringing a positive connection? And more will tend to flow from that. All righty, Claire says, I've been with a man for 3 months. We decided to make it exclusive about a month ago, but I'm struggling and get feelings that it isn't right, but I don't know how to read my intuition. Any thoughts? So my sense is just saying, how do I dial my intuition? How do I notice my intuition, right? And that's definitely a muscle that we can grow, in my experience, right? The more we just start to listen to it, even if you had no idea how to actually do it, but you just set your intention, I want to listen to my intuition more. I'm taking it seriously. And when I journal, as much as I journal, ideally, maybe most days of my life, right? If you want to practice something, I'm journaling about my intuition. Did I notice any intuitions today? Did I act on my intuition? What got in the way of my intuition? So it's like, before I'm telling you anything about how to do your intuition, can you maximize your own resources about your own intuition? Permission to learn, permission to not know, and then just using life as its own feedback loop. For most of us, let's put it in the sort of the negative. What gets in the way of our intuition is here, right? Most of us, when we live head up, it's very hard to access our intuition. When we overthink, overanalyze, and doubt. So anything that you can do to reduce the noise on doubt or anxiety or overthinking, right? Anytime you're like, oh, I know I'm overthinking this, but I'm just stuck, just make a decision. Just practice making a decision. A or B, what's your intuition, right? Sometimes it's quicker to get to our intuition just by saying, have a friend ask you, okay, do this or do that, A or B, your intuition is, and it doesn't actually matter if it's right, it's that you're practicing. And over time, that channel can start to get stronger, right? So permission to not have your intuition dialed in, but to be really taking aim at bringing it into your life. The other thing you can do is surround yourself more with people who care about that, right? There are a lot of people who are very fixated in their heads. Everything is planned out. Everything is always on a particular schedule. Everything is always, kind of hyper thought through. All decisions have to happen rationally and logically. And there's absolutely a time and place for structure, rationality. It's huge. And if you only live from that place, it probably means you're not in touch with your intuition, right? So the more you're around people who reflect back, like, oh, what's your intuition about this? Or they're telling you about their lives. And like, well, my intuition is, that can be a really powerful thing. The opposite of intuition is often doubt. And doubt, we often worry that we're going to follow the wrong path. And there may be easier or better paths for us. But if something is really important, like a relationship, oftentimes it will come back, right? Even if you're like, oh, I thought it wasn't, but then it will come back to you. So sometimes it's just about not being too afraid of going down the wrong path, that life won't leave you completely bereft of your own guidance, right? That in a benevolent universe, that life will support you at some level to find the things and the resources and the learning that you need. You may have the easier path because you listened the first time, or you may have to take it on the fifth sitting, but you'll probably come to a lot of the same places. So moment to moment is sometimes not quite as consequential as we make it. I mean, there's a paradox there, right? Every moment is unique, it's precious, it's beautiful, it's here, it's right now, it's not coming back. And when it comes to decisions about, do I be in relationship or do I change career, it's not always that it's like just make or break on one specific moment. So kind of chill out on yourself a little bit and give yourself permission to learn. I need to date more than one person. I tend to focus on one person, and I'm not sure this is healthy, says Candy. Also, I'm using the 80-20 rule. 80 to me, 20 to other. This has helped me a lot. I'm really glad that 80-20 rule has helped you a lot. For those of you that haven't come across that in previous things that I've shared, that's where you practice keeping 80% of the attention on yourself and only 20% of your attention on the other person. And this is really useful for any of you that tend to be more other-focused or lose yourself or lose your power to other people. It's to really practice noticing what's going on in your internal world and being more curious about that than the actual content of what the other person is saying to you. Yes, it can be unhealthy to get fixated on dating one person. That's possibly true. Some of us are a little bit more wired that way. I think that if there's someone that has our interest, we sort of want to see where that goes before somewhere else. I think, again, my bit of advice here would just be, to be not making assumptions about any person that you're dating until we have some shared reality over time about what it is or what it isn't. But yeah, I've definitely seen people, particularly dating more than one person is useful if you're the kind of person that's like, we've gone on 2 dates and I think we're in a relationship because we've started to text each other every day. That's sometimes a red flag for me. That if you're honest, you look back, you prematurely create relationship with people, then dating more than one person can be a good antidote to that. Scrolly. Playing catch up here. Thanks for all these questions, by the way, and thanks for your presence here. I appreciate it. It's great to have so many of us here. I appreciate the quality of these questions. I'm actually scrolling back up because when a new question comes in, it sometimes takes where I was away from me. Just while I'm doing that, I'll just share just quickly about where I am right now. So I'm still in southern Spain, and for the last 2 weeks, I've been doing a therapeutic fast, and I have, for 10 days, I've been on 250 calories a day, which is basically herbal tea with honey in the morning and a small fruit juice and half a bowl of soup for lunch, and a whole bowl of soup. This actually isn't soup. This is broth, so it's quite thin, for dinner. And it seems like it has helped me I was having some issues with my liver function, or just my liver function results, so they've normalized, which is awesome. And I've also lost some weight, which wasn't really intentional, but seems like a good and healthy thing. And having reintroduced food, I feel a lot better. Turns out that I feel more energetic actually when I'm eating than when I'm fasting. But fasting wasn't too hard. It wasn't really, really hard. Just often feeling like I don't have that much energy, but enjoying the ability to rest. So I think it's something that's going to be part of my life going forward. I may look into intermittent fasting. I know some of you probably have done that. And I'm imagining maybe having a one time a year where I do fast. And I think the beginning of the year is quite a good time for that. So, all right. Let me know if you have any questions about that. Back to the comments here. Why would I have a conversation with a guy that is breadcrumbing me and hurting me? Yeah, you might not. I think sometimes you can just make like a 2 to 3 sentence communication just to say, hey, I'm going no contact. It's been good, or not even it's been good, but please don't contact me or whatever. Just so it's declared into the space. Sometimes when people don't declare into the space, when the person loops back, because there's actually not been anything established, they can be liable. This may not be you, but they can be liable to kind of kick things back off because we never actually made the declaration. There's something, it's called speech acts. It's kind of like a fancy phrase, but it means that there is actually power in the declaration of speech, that it can mean something to actually declare, yeah, we are over, or we are not going to be in contact. So if you're someone that ducks that, and then sometimes things loop around in a way that doesn't serve you, I would really encourage you into that. But yeah, we're not trying to have a huge unpacking conversation. If a guy isn't really showing up for you, I don't think that you need to have a big kind of debrief. Have the debrief with someone else, process with someone else, and then there may be like a few pieces from that you want to share or not, and that's totally fine. Textual intercourse, I'm glad you like that. People do seem to like that. Hey, Annette, welcome. I keep getting attached to people too early. I'm afraid of having the availability conversation. I'm afraid of seeming needy, bringing it up too early. Yeah, I hear you, Sarah. So to that point I was just making, so it might benefit you to date more than one person. It might benefit you to have someone in your corner, right? Coach or therapist or a good friend that you actually have track you as you're getting into a relationship with the purposes of keeping your feet on the ground. I've seen this work really well, where someone has someone that's a bit of a reality check for them. And it's like, hey, you're starting to get really into this, and this is only date 3, hun. You might want to slow it down, The other thing that can avoid you getting attached too early is to not get into huge correspondence between dates, right? Yeah, maybe fine if you just want to text occasionally and just say, hey, how are you? Or hey, I hope you're having a good day. But don't get into like a pattern of texting that implies a relationship, right? So don't do the I text you everything first thing in the day and I text you good night. That's what you do when you're in a relationship with someone. But if you're just dating and you're not in a natural relationship, don't do that. And if you know that that's your tendency, even if it feels a bit unnatural, maybe just rein that in, Maybe put that attention somewhere else for the moment. Maybe, check in with a girlfriend late at night rather than this person. Yeah, I mean, a little thing on neediness, right? Just, again, permission to be a little needy because we're all needy at some level, right? The least needy people often have a part of them that they're not in touch with, which is really needy, and they would be afraid of if they actually gave it voice. So, we all are needy. It might just be that if you're prone to have the availability conversation kind of early or kind of need that, maybe it's practice for you just to kind of chill out on that. And you might need a lot of support in order to chill out on it. And that you're actually going to have the intention that the other person is going to bring the availability conversation unless we get through a particular threshold, right? Maybe if we've been dating for 2 to 3 months, then I might bring it if they haven't. But that way it might just stop you forming an attachment that doesn't serve you. And I know that sometimes it can be difficult, and ideally, you find a partner that wants to work on this sort of stuff with you. But you don't get to being with a partner who's going to work on this with you by prematurely being in a relationship with the wrong person. Karen, hey Karen, hope you're well. Thanks for all your heads up as well when we're in New Zealand. Unfortunately, for family reasons and bereavement, we actually had to leave New Zealand super promptly. But I appreciate it. Karen used to coach with me. I want to say thank you for all your private sessions. It's definitely helped. I'm now engaged because of your help in getting vulnerable. That is awesome. That's super awesome, Karen. Thank you. I appreciate you coming on and sharing that, and I'm super psyched for you. And yeah, I always appreciated the diligence that you brought to doing this kind of work. So thank you. That's amazing. If any of you want to do one-on-one or group work with me privately, I'm just going to place the link in here. jackbutler.com/apply. I'm not actually taking on private clients right now in this moment. My practice is full, but I go to that list first. So if you want to be in the waiting for that, or to hear about when I have openings, go and fill that in. But Karen, hey, awesome. Please send me a picture of your engagement if you have an engagement party or anything like that. Some more stuff about money. I'd love the advice for the guy to come to you. We tend to do more, and I believe Jack has a good point about him coming to you. Yes, I think that is it's important, really, right? Because if that dynamic isn't there from the beginning, I don't think it suddenly develops. You know, I speak with a lot of married women who are sort of like, wow, he was actually, you know, he used to do a lot and show up a lot, and now he's kind of less, and there's less romantic. And so I think it's less likely that it increases over time. It's more likely that it decreases. So if it's really not there from the beginning, that's a red flag, or that's something to really be aware of. Getting attached to unavailable guys seems to have a deeper root cause based in childhood. I see it as an attempt to right the wrongs from dysfunctional upbringing. I think you are right that oftentimes it does have root causes in childhood, and perhaps the unavailability of one or both of our caregivers, or sometimes that's how we experience love, was sort of like we had to kind of work really hard to get someone's attention. So yeah, I think there's a lot there. The only thing I will say as a little caveat is, and I sometimes get this, you know, if you ever apply for coaching and your application is successful and we get on an exploratory call, then one of the things I often notice is people can have this very like laid out story about who they are and where they've come from, right? I have these problems in relationship because, you know, my dad was like this, and this happened in my childhood, and then I had this really bad experience. And whilst that may be all true, it can sometimes become a sort of like a limiting factor because I'm fixated into a story which kind of keeps me in the past. So I always like to keep a little bit of like openness or humility around what we know about ourselves, because we can create our own prison sometimes by reinforcing things. Absolutely, if we've had unavailability from a parent, or we've had abuse, or we've had trauma, we want to take that stuff seriously. It's real, it's serious, absolutely. We just might not want to get too fixated into the story of it, because sometimes it stops us learning something new. There might be this other avenue that we haven't looked at, or it might be like, yeah, that all happened, and I don't want to base my identity on it, right? That I know that anytime I base my identity on the past, I'm losing presence and I'm losing authenticity. So if you find yourself, someone sort of asking yourself about you, and you've got this like 15-minute patter about who you are and where you came from, maybe try and say it a little differently. Maybe slow down and notice, is there anything that's really true that I want to communicate in this moment about who I really am? Because that can sometimes be more true and more freeing. Welcome to any of you that joined us recently. Thanks for being here on this live stream. I've had a great attendance. I totally appreciate it. If you like this, please hit the like button. It helps us get more people come and be part of the community and to see this video after we post it up. So if you like it, smash that like button, and I appreciate it. And thanks to those of you who've also been here for a number of these live streams and have been supporting this channel from the beginning. I know what it's like to put out videos and to not get that much response. I did that for years. So the fact that there's a whole bunch of us here together online, I appreciate it. I love it. It's made a massive difference in my life. So thank you. Your presence here matters to me a lot. Do you believe, says Kayleen, people can generally be in touch with exes on healthy terms? I don't believe in cutting people out when there was a past, while seeing someone new and not let it interfere with the new. Yeah, I absolutely do think that people can be on healthy terms with exes. I think there are a few things that I want to say about that. So number one is that your current partner should be able to have something to say about that, right? So if you have communication with an ex, I think it's good to let your partner know. If you are going to be spending time in person with your ex, I think it can be good to include your partner, right? That maybe not every time, but maybe there's a time where you actually get together and they come and meet them so they know who they are, so they can get a read on them as well. That anytime an ex does something that is not trustworthy, that you let your partner know that. Like, hey, I got this text that felt flirtatious and that's not cool, but I'm letting you know. So basically that you're trustworthy when it comes to contact with your exes. I think that's really important. Another thing is to realize that some people really don't want that, right? So some people are in the, it's done worldview, and that might be different from you. You might want to be friends with all your exes, and your partner may not be friends with any of their exes. So sometimes you have to come to some accommodations about that. And it might be that you have less contact with your ex. I think it's often safer to have contact with exes when they are significantly moved on, right? That they may be in relationship. I think a single ex that hasn't really significantly related intimately with someone else since you, I think sometimes can be more of a threat. I think realizing that threats to relationship are a real thing, and actually not making that wrong, that you and your partner sometimes have a job. One of them is, let's acknowledge if there are threats to our relationship, and exes are definitely one potential category of threats. That's not to say that any particular ex is, or any of them are, but just to be aware that it's not sort of illegitimate for someone to have questions or concerns about that, and really that the focus and the priority is on the now with our partner, than kind of trying to keep an ex happy. If you really can't sort of disconnect from an ex and treat them more like like an old friend, right? That's someone that with sort of old friends. It's not like we're in touch a lot, but when I'm back at Christmas, we meet up or we connect. If you can't have a sort of frequency with your ex that's more like a kind of an old friend, that's also sometimes can raise questions. Like, is it actually just a friendship, or is there still some underlying energy? And it's not always easy for people to see that. Sometimes people just think, oh, I want to be friends, but actually, if that person didn't contact them for 3 months, they would feel kind of strange about it. So again, just notice and have awareness. Like, if your ex not being in touch is an issue to you, there might be something for you to actually look at. I have an ex who is now my best friend. We have no romantic feelings, but can support each other on our life journey. Yeah, so sometimes that happens. I mean, my curiosity in that sort of situation is, some partners may find it difficult if their partner says that they're best friends with their ex, and that that's actually true for them. So that can sometimes be something to consider. And if the best friendship with the ex is more important than kind of the right connection with someone else, that can be something just to look at. And sometimes it's true that is how it goes, but I've also seen situations like that where it's sort of blocking someone from really meeting someone, and maybe you want your actual partner to be a best friend to you. What's your read on a guy who uses terms of endearment on his texts, even if it is just on initial stage of meeting, even on first text message, met online and not met face-to-face yet? How to tell him to tone it down? If that's enough of a problem for you that you feel like you have to bring it up, then I would probably just shoot straight with as much care as you can. Hey, I'm looking forward to getting to know you more. I notice you're calling me honey, and that feels a bit premature for me. Would you mind not calling me that? So see if you can do it cleanly, right? That's the practice on your side of the fence. He might have any number of responses to that. Yes, of course, no problem. Wow, you're high maintenance. See you later. There could be all sorts of things. That's his business. We're not trying to caretake that. We're just trying to be caring in our orientation. And if you can't say it without a sting in the tail, you might just want to work it somewhere else first, right? Like with a friend or a coach or something. Because ideally, you might be able to say it in a way which is like, hey, you've done nothing wrong. I just noticed this feels a bit familiar for me, and I'm not there yet. And it might be that ultimately it's its own form of, incompatibility or something like that, that this guy is not really going to be your guy. But let's see. It's all these things in dating that come up and they're kind of weird, or what's this? They're just great opportunities for practice, right? To practice communicating what's true for me without being triggered, or to practice communicating something that's a little bit direct, but from my heart. Awesome. Love it. Bring it. And it's good practice, whether it goes, it's sort of irrespective of outcome. Hey, Jack, I'm curious to know your opinion on when to have sex with a guy who's relatively invested. You skipped my question. Thanks. Sorry, I missed that. Well, I think you have sex with a guy when you feel ready for it, right? Which sounds sort of simple. There may be different facets that go into that. So that's kind of like an intuition question, right? It's like, what is your intuition telling you? Sometimes if you're not, you've connected with someone and you feel kind of secure in the connection, you're not ready for that, it's because there's other information there, right? Like maybe something doesn't feel trustworthy. I would probably be checking out his world, that if you're in the assumption or perspective that we are relatively invested, I would be curious if that's his perspective. The one thing you might want to be aware of is the sort of the high upfront investment guy that becomes drop-off guy, because some guys, and women also, I think, but a lot of guys have an investment strategy, which is I'm investing until I know that I'm not, or that I know that I am. So the actual fact that I've been investing a lot over weeks doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be in a long-term committed relationship. So that can just be something to be aware of. But I think when you're ready. I think it's an intuition thing. I think it's a heart thing. It's do you feel like you're going to be met and respected in a way that works for you? Does it mean something to you, right? Like if having sex with a guy really means something with you, like we're definitely going to be seeing each other ongoingly, like you might just want to bring that into the space so that I'm not in some kind of assumption, and that he's not also unconsciously signing a contract that he doesn't know he's signing with you. So, I get it that some of those things might not seem as romantic as it's sort of just all unfolding in right timing, and sometimes things can be more romantic because you can really give yourself knowing that we've actually squared away certain conversations. So I wouldn't be afraid of those conversations. And, often there's going to be other conversations, right, around, are we exclusive? Sexual health questions. I think there's other things that probably need to go in there as well. Excuse me. What's your take on cheap men? I think by cheap men, you mean guys that probably are scrimping and frugal and maybe don't pay for much. Is that what you mean? I mean, there's many ways that someone could be cheap. I mean, frugality is a value. I definitely have a frugal side. Some women really like that. I think if cheap also means, we're never going to do anything that's kind of like fun or, romantic or that costs a little bit, then if that's not really your scene, ideally we don't want to be in the business of really needing to change someone. I do think people change as a relationship progresses. And I do think that people might change in the ways that we bring our wounds and our unconscious strategies, right? So we might help our partners change those things. But a lot of deciding whether the guy is the right guy is you look at the things, you say, well, what are the potential deal breakers, right? And you look at them and kind of say, can I live with them in earnest? Because the right guy is sometimes going to be the guy that it's not that he doesn't have a dark side. It's not that he doesn't have wounds. It's not that he doesn't have frailties. It's not that he doesn't have weirdness. It's just you can actually love on those things and kind of get with them. Maybe not every moment of every day, but broadly speaking, you can sign up to be with someone. I think that's a huge part of being with someone. A lot of people just look at the upside, right? Do we have the same vision, values? Do we, want to build the same lifestyle, blah, blah, blah? All important, obviously. But there's also, can I be with this person who is a flawed human being, as we all are? And can I notice what their actual flaws are? And sometimes you don't notice all of them, right? You notice other things as you get more deeply into being in relationship. And sometimes things only come up when you're more deeply in relationship. But can I love on the light and the dark side is another way of saying that. So if you could never really be with a guy that you consider cheap, so he would basically have to change in order to be in a relationship with you, that might just not be a good place for you to invest. Because it sounds like you might have another value there, like quality or the fine things in life, so, ideally we want to be there. It can be that people notice over time that actually certain things they thought were deal breakers aren't. Like, I don't think you can have an inexhaustible list of deal breakers because you won't actually end up in a relationship, right? We all have weird things about us, in my experience, right? We all have frailties, right? I have some real physical sensitivities that a lot of people don't have. I can walk into a room that a lot of people feel absolutely well. And for me, it doesn't work with my respiratory system. That's a frailty, right? Sometimes means I can't do things that it would be fun to do. I have huge dietary sensitivities. Sometimes that doesn't make me the most easy person to cater for or fun to be around the table. Sometimes I can get really angry and moody unexpectedly. It doesn't make me fun to be around. There's some of my frailties, right? And the list goes on. Everyone has these things. The question is, can you kind of sign on and love someone in the places that they are a flawed human being? So, to loop that back, if cheap guy just is not something you want to live with, you absolutely get to have your call about that. We just want to make sure that we aren't, we just want to make sure we aren't kind of running judgments that actually stop us ending up being with a compatible partner. But, my intuition is that if a guy is cheap and you're noticing that right up front, maybe he's just not your guy. Kaylin, speaking of attachment style, what's your tips on coping with an avoidant, anxious attachment style and how to connect with someone with that background? Well, so mostly people might fall one of those sides of the fence than the other, right? So sometimes people have a more avoidant style or they have a more anxious style. People could have both. My main tips are including it, right? As we become more conscious in relationship, we actually become more conscious in dating as well. And more things can kind of get included in conversations as we're working out, do we want to be in relationship? And attachment can be part of that conversation. I would probably lead by a reveal of your own attachment, right? Hey, I've been reading about attachment. I've got the book, or I'm interested in it. Have you come across it? Oh, you haven't? Would you mind if I shared with you? Okay, cool. Well, there's these things called attachment styles. And I actually know that I have, even if I have mostly a secure style, like my go-to place when I'm not feeling secure is, I feel ambivalent or anxious or whatever it is. So I would lead with that so that you're leading with your vulnerability rather than kind of like trying to sort of coach a guy. And I would also lead with, what comes up for you, right? There is a kind of, the more we are securely attached kind of in ourselves, the more our partners might do something, or potential partners, that is anxious and avoidant, and it might actually impact us a little less. Like we might be able to regulate and stay, centered in ourselves. So I think there's a whole bunch of work that individually we can do there. There's also things that we can reveal there. If someone gets curious, you can obviously do like an attachment questionnaire. You can do that together. I'm a fan of people. I've been there and done this, working on this stuff with a therapist. But that's difficult in the early stages, if you're not actually in a relationship with someone. I think as you're getting to know someone, you just might want to see, what's their level of openness? What's their level of curiosity? Like, is there something that this can be included? Because it's hard to, does anyone unconsciously heal their attachment style? Maybe not, right? Which means that it's always some kind of conscious work or conscious awareness that we're bringing to it. All right. Jack, hi, ET, says, I've dated a drop-off guy and now I saw him with his new possible girlfriend. I'm still suffering, to be honest, and seeing with him made me feel like a loser for not having moved on. Is there a way to feel better? Well, generally, I think the way to feel better in life is to feel what you need to feel, right? So it might be a little bit of short-term difficulty for a longer-term sort of equanimity or clearing of your system. So, feeling like a loser, right? That is like a self-judgment, probably, right? So you're probably being a bit critical of yourself. So you might be able to just put that aside. What you might feel is sad. You might feel angry. Like if we just boil it down, I'm quite a fan and coach people. I'm like, let's just get it down to the core emotions, right? And often in this territory, it'd be sadness and anger. Can you feel that? Can you let it go? Can you create a space where you're able to feel that? Do you need to be held by someone? Do you need to be held by a therapist or a coach? Do you need to punch some pillows? Do you need to, journal? Do you need to journal your anger out, right? Maybe you're really angry, and maybe you're angry at yourself because you saw it coming or some red flags. So I think the way to feel better is to generally move through that stuff, right? Rather than suppress, repress, ignore, dissociate, or employ some defense on it. Also it's good to get back out there, right? So what we don't want is to become, woe betide me navel gazers. So do your work, do your journaling, do your feeling, and then put something on your calendar that makes you feel good. Go to the gym, go to the cinema, have a date with a girlfriend, go dancing. And if you could ever get to this, and I realize it's hard and you don't want to do this as some kind of spiritual bypass, but just realize, this probably wasn't your guy. And even if you wanted it to be, part of someone being your guy is that they want the job, right? And that's hard if we have unrequited love. But once you really get with that program, I think it just makes it a little bit easier, because you're like, oh, I actually want a guy who self-declares and knows that he wants to show up for me in that way. Every other guy is just every other guy to me, including guys I've dated, and it didn't go there. There's something about that, just the like, wow, there's no substitute. Like if a guy can just move on and date someone else, he's not your guy, right? And as devastating or as rejecting as that might feel, and sometimes it feels completely rejecting because there's other rejection in our lives that we never felt at the time, or we felt so rejected in a previous relationship or as a kid that we've kind of said, whoa, I never want to feel that again. So we kind of have fear of rejection and all that stuff. All of that's good personal work, and there's just a sort of like, yeah, in a very genuine way, not just a like, I'm not going to feel things, I'm going to feel it. And there are plenty more fish in the sea. And there's probably someone out there that really does want to invest in you and be with you and do the work with you and doesn't have eyes or a heart for someone else. So with all that said, I do hope you feel better, but not prematurely. I want you to feel really better. Hi from England from a Spanish fan. Hey, appreciate that. Curious that from what I've been experiencing of the Spanish climate, I'd be curious what had you go to England, although England is obviously my first love, and I have a lot of fondness for my home country. People are distinguishing frugality and a lack of generosity. I like that. Are there good ways to get to know someone online besides the usual online dating websites? Because there are lots of unavailable men there, in my opinion. I just mean the first steps. Of course, you need to date pretty soon. Yeah. I mean, obviously, and I maybe said this earlier, you can quickly move conversations into something like, FaceTime or Skype. And sometimes if people don't want to give personal details away, they set up like a Google Voice account, right? So they give that number. So if they ever decided, oh, I'm being called and I don't want to, they can just kind of reject that number and move on, and have that number bounces a call to your mobile or your landline, your cell phone, so that they never actually know your number. So that's something that you can do. There probably are places that you can, forums of interest, communities of interest where you can meet people, right? If you are interested in, whatever it is, yoga, meditation, healthy cooking, paths of personal growth, ancient history, you name it, there's probably places that you can meet there. I think they would be my starting points. So would a cheap man be wrong for any woman who is healthy? I mean, again, I'm curious how we're defining cheap here. I just think it's about alignment, and finding someone that's aligned. Some people like frugality. They actually like it when someone's really penny pinching, because they have that same quality. And between them, they're going to be, the people who've never made much money but will wind up millionaires. I've known people like that, never really had they've had a consistent but relatively mediocre salary, and they're millionaires because they just save everything. They never replace anything. Some people like to live like that, right? It's like extreme self-preservation. But so I think you could be healthy and be aligned with that. I just think you need to be aligned with it. Please don't feel like a failure. I appreciate the support you're showing to one another here. Anne says, hi, live, so cool. You're my favorite coach. Oh, you've helped me so much, so knowledgeable. Thank you. Super appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks for all of you. I know there's some of you that have now been here since the beginning of this live stream. Super appreciate that. And for those of you that have just joined us, welcome. Give us a like if you're liking what you see here. It helps get this video out there. And also, if you haven't joined me on Instagram, join me on Instagram. And if you want, download my Real Freedom Guide. It's one of the best ways to stay in touch with me via my mailing list, and it's also a really good read. It helps you basically be more of yourself, more true to yourself, and to know what are some of the paths and practices to being more fully yourself. Because if you don't know my work, that's really the, in the sort of relationship niche, that's really where my piece is how to be yourself more and how to bring that into dating and relationships. There's plenty of relationship advice out there that doesn't really have a lot to do with being authentic. And That's cool. But if authenticity and being more of the real you is important, then you're in the right place. Is a woman reaching out 65% and a man reaching out 45% too masculine on the woman's part, or is it just more of an anxious attachment style? Good question. I like that you're bringing that question. That might be hard for me to say. I'd be curious what your own discernment of that is. People could vary just in how communicative they are, right? People also vary, and this is one thing that seems to connect with extroversion and introversion. So extroverted people tend to have higher frequency of contact, but lower per contact, right? And introverted people sometimes have less frequency, but kind of longer, right? They like kind of less, but sort of higher contact. And extroverted people sometimes like more, but a quicker contact. So that can sometimes be a dynamic. If you're going to be in partnership with this person, I'm curious, can you both find something that feels at least minimally good to you, right? And does that mean that you actually want to dial down a bit and put some of that connection energy into other places? Is it that there's actually an implicit request here that you want this guy to be communicating more, and you actually want to make a request like, hey, could you text me a little bit more? Or could you text me during the day more? Or could you text me on the weekends more, right? And maybe we can build a shared reality of something that actually feels good to both of us. All right. You'll get to know your guy more as time goes on, and you will know if you can trust him. I wouldn't make a blanket decision about exes. Yeah, I agree with that. Jack, what do you think of testing? Not mind games, of course, but testing. Can you give us a few good examples? Well, I'm curious what you mean by testing. I'm imagining you might be meaning like testing the guy, like testing, is the relationship secure? My sense is that that's actually quite a routine thing, particularly for women who are orienting to relationship like it's their security system, is that, just like I think it's Dr. Glover, he does men's work, said this, I want to test my alarm every so often, right? I want to test my alarm, my smoke alarm, to know, or my car alarm, to know that if it's actually needed, does it go off, right? And so quite often the feminine tests the masculine to say, hey, are you actually going to show up for me? Or are you going to lose it? Or are you not going to be there? You're going to walk out. So I think that is actually just probably healthy. I don't necessarily have tips about best ways of doing that kind of testing. But, just pay attention to the data that you're getting, right? The data that you're getting over time will let you know whether this is a guy that's consistent enough and is hanging around enough and is showing up enough. And if it's not that, I think that needs to be addressed early. I don't think suddenly a guy just wakes up one morning and is like, wow, I want to just show up for you in a way that I've never shown up. Sometimes guys get to that point because actually the woman says, hey, I want more. And actually, if this is the only thing that's available, I love you, but this isn't going to be the right relationship for me. And the guy goes away and thinks about it. And sometimes he moves on because it's not right for him. And sometimes he's like, you know what, I actually really don't want to lose you. I want to be in a relationship. And I get that I've been kind of half-assing it or showing up in a limited way, and I want to step up. So that can be another example of I wouldn't even call that a test. I would just call that an honest, authentic communication about what I want from relationship and what isn't feeling very negotiable for me. And that maybe you see it with this guy, but that it would mean, showing up in other ways. So that's like a threshold conversation to say, hey, if we want the whole enchilada, we're not quite there yet. And I'm curious if you want the whole enchilada with me. This is a really good video, Jack. Very interesting, really good advice. Thank you. I appreciate that. You're welcome. Amber says, Jack, I was wondering if you do one-on-one coaching. Yes, I do. I only take on a very kind of small client load at any time. I'm currently full, but I've just posted the link. If you want to apply for coaching, I go to my application list first. Most of the time when I coach people privately, we do it over a number of months. It's usually a minimum of 3 months. So I tend to work with people in committed containers. And periodically, I do make myself available for one-to-one strategy calls. And I do those on an ad hoc basis. If you want to be made aware of those, download the Real Freedom Guide, because that will put you on my mailing list, because it's my mailing list that I go to first after I've gone through people that have applied for one-on-one coaching. Sometimes that list is long enough that that's the only place that I recruit from for one-on-one conversations. As things are growing, I'm kind of lucky in that I'm getting a lot more incoming interest. But I love coaching, and I also will be at some point working with people in a group format again. So if that's of interest, I'd encourage you just apply for coaching, because again, it's going to be that group of people that have the right of first refusal on anything that I do privately going forward. But thanks for your interest. If you have a guy friend that you can bounce ideas and information off, is very useful. He's super protective too, and has great advice for me from a guy's perspective. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So long as it's not sort of like if you would really be with me, I'd want to be with you. So I think it's great when it's like an actual genuine friendship, and it's not that one person wants more and that's never been declared. I've coached my former boyfriend, still in a good friendship. Awesome. Yeah, I can say that I'm still in good contact with some of my exes. It seems to me, says Sarah, that if a guy doesn't show great interest in investment right from the first message, he ends up dropping off really fast. How can I filter guys better? I wonder if you're answering your own question there in some ways, that if guys don't show that initiative off the bat, that's really good information. I think, it's sobriety of filtering, right? Not too much, not too little. So we don't need to work super hard as if like, I exchanged a few texts with this guy and I've wasted so much energy, right? It's like, no, that's 5 minutes of your life. Don't worry about it too much. What we want to avoid is that we're starting to invest significant energy in the guys that aren't going anywhere, So not too much, not too little. You don't need to get prematurely like you have to filter everything always right off the bat, unless you're getting the signal and the intuition is there. I don't want to invest or don't want to even communicate with this guy. Fine. But I think your filter is your intuition, is probably what I'm saying. Your filter is your ability to notice red flags, is to notice consistency, is to notice if actions and words align. Let those things be your filter. Most of you know how to filter. You might just have forgotten, or you might not be paying enough attention to yourself, or you might be getting deluded. And so something else happens. When you get into connection with a guy, your anxious attachment is getting activated. Or when you get in connection with a guy, your romance fantasy is getting activated. Or when you get into connection with a guy, your frustrated love narrative is getting activated. That, it never works out for me, so you always go for unavailable guys, so you keep confirming this. So yes, sometimes there's work to do to clear out some things that may be distorting our filters. But my sense is that the vast majority of us have those filters if we're paying attention to them and doing our work. How do you know when to fight for a relationship, when to let it go? That's a really good question. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So one thing that can help with that is to is if you're both working out whether that's true, is to get some professional support, right? Either from a coach or a therapist or someone similar, because I think it can allow you to really hold it. I think if in doubt, as long as it's not, the relationship isn't, hugely abusive or something that's like taking a toll that it shouldn't. I'm a fan of if in doubt, stay in. If in doubt, stay in, because if we work it for another month and it doesn't work out, okay, I lost a month, but in the big scheme of things, maybe I didn't really lose that much, and there's a possibility that it might work out. If you're fighting for a relationship, if a guy has made a clear declaration to you that he doesn't want to be in a relationship with you, I wouldn't be fighting that, right? If you get that he's actually in his truth and he's telling me that he doesn't want to be in a relationship with me, I wouldn't be trying to convince him otherwise. But if fighting for the relationship is more like, yeah, it's kind of like it's not going so well, or we're hitting some snags, I would try and get really clear how much of your own work is involved in this, right? Because one way of orienting to relationship is it's a path. Relationship is a path of awakening, path of consciousness. And in that path, we're using relationship to wake us up, right? And we notice, oh, actually, I'm hitting wounds here, and my wounds are talking, or I'm getting super defensive, Or, wow, I'm discovering that I'm completely unsober, or I have a repressed anger, or you name it. All these sorts of issues, they're going to come out in an intimate relationship, and they may not have come out in other relationships if they're not as close, or if they're not the person that you're kind of here to do some of your work with, right? So noticing where you really stand in the relationship, right? If there are things that are coming up that you're like, yeah, actually, this is some of my stuff. Now, if you're like, no, there's nothing in here that's of me, and actually this person just isn't a good choice for me to be in relationship with, that's a slightly different thing. But, if two people both want to make something work, I'm a fan of staying in and seeing if that can work, because if it's a substantive relationship that you've already invested a lot in, yes, we don't want to be in a sunk cost fallacy that just because I have invested time and energy, I need to keep it. But if you put it on a timeline, like, hey, let's both just imagine that we're both in for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. We're really going to work this and see. I'm kind of a fan of that. There can be things that are deal breakers, right? Because that's really, when you boil that question down, should I let this relationship go? I'm saying, are any of these things an actual deal breaker for me? And sometimes that can be around things like one person wanting children, another person not. It can be around the level of showing up for the relationship, right? That one person just wants a lot more from the relationship than the other person. You get to choose what your deal breakers are. I'm not a fan of relationships ending in a fight, right? I've coached plenty of people in this instance where they're like, oh no, it's over. He said this, I said that, it's done. Never going to hear from him again. And it's not actually real. It's like, what was real was you guys had a bust up, and that's real. Most of us in real relationships have ruptures. Is that the full truth? Most of us, when we're ruptured, we're triggered, right? And we say stuff, and our anger talks, and we disconnect, and we withdraw, and our defenses get activated. So I'm a fan of, if we're really going to end this relationship, or even if I'm going to end it unilaterally, I'm doing it from a place of presence and from center. I'm not doing it from reaction and defense. So I'm not a fan of sort of assuming that because we had this argument, now it's over, or, realizing that adult relationships tend to involve conflict. We need to learn how to metabolize it. Sometimes that's not really easy. Sometimes it's not pretty. Sometimes personally, I'm not very good at that. I get it. It's hard, but it's also the path of realness for a lot of us. So I don't make any assumptions about that. Normally I invite, in those situations, I invite my clients, no, you guys need to have a real conversation, probably a series of them, and co-explore together. It definitely takes two to tango. It's very hard to stay in relationship long-term if one person is 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So again, until you're out, you're in. That's my orientation. Until you're actually out, be in. Don't be half in and out. Be in. Build your life as if you're in, and see. Maybe it's authentic to let the person know, like, yeah, this is a really tough time. I feel like we're really at that sort of make or break stage. Let them know what the deal breakers are. Let them know if they have a different view, or if there's something they want to work on with you, or so yeah, those would be some of my considerations. And I know that discernment sometimes isn't easy. And if it's really, really like 50-50 for a long period of time, you might just say, okay, well, if I'm that ambivalent ongoingly about wanting to be here, maybe I shouldn't be here, because the opportunity cost is too high to every day be like, should I be here? Should I be in this relationship? Now, if that's your doubt talking, and you need to learn how to distinguish doubt and relax your doubtful mind, that's a whole piece of inner work. But if you're not someone who's run by doubt, but you're just ongoingly like, I can't even just keep showing up fully, maybe at some point you just have to pull the plug, because you're living like a half-baked life, rather than a life of being fully in. Your thoughts are so solid and helpful. Thank you. You're welcome. I appreciate that. My guy was clearly avoidant, and I tried to educate him about attachment. He wants to commit a relationship. He's not willing to invest in learning the skills of how to create a secure attachment. Yeah, I'm sorry. I hear that. I think that's not uncommon, and that can be really difficult. But I think you probably have your answer. Assuming that you're accurately seeing that there's an attachment dynamic which is kind of governing the relationship. This might be a deal breaker, just to kind of build as well on what I was saying in the previous question. If a guy has got zero interest in growth, zero interest in doing the work, and you want to show up for the work and you are committed, that can be a deal breaker. And I've seen it can be heartbreaking where people are like, wow, I've invested so much in this guy, and it's just I'm changing and evolving and he can't really change and evolve with me. That might be a deal breaker. So yeah, that's tough. Ideally, we try and kind of ascertain that before we get too in deep. Jack says, Amber, my love language is physical touch and my guy's quality time and acts of service. How can we meet in the middle? Because I have a real experience of rejection just from not getting physical. Yeah, I mean, ideally you meet in the middle, but by actually being in a co-exploration of this, right? And for him to really get that he's not doing anything wrong. There's just this thing that is really important to you, and vice versa. So I would always start by giving. So can you really give those things that his love languages? Make sure that those tanks are really filled up, and maybe there's ways that he might not initiate touch with you, but you can bring him into touch, right? So most guys are going to probably be more touchy-feely when they're not stressed, right? So maybe there's some kind of transition activity like running him a bath or jumping in the shower together or going and getting a couples massage or something that kind of leads him into a more sensual space. Find out from him what might work for him. Maybe there's some things that you can say, hey, I want to bring some things in the relationship that would help me get some of my needs met. Are you open to it? Would you come to a massage with me? Right? So maybe make it easy for him. Maybe give him some things that even if you initially take responsibility for organizing them, you are ultimately responsible for meeting your needs. Ideally in a relationship, we are somewhat co-responsible, and I care about you meeting your needs, but you ultimately have to be responsible for that. And so it could also get to the point where you say, hey, I actually have this need for touch and it consistently isn't getting met here. And that's not working for me. So I need a solution to that. Would you be open to, me some time doing contact improvisation, or me offering to massage some people, or me being a little bit more cuddly with my girlfriend in a non-sexual way, or would you be happy for me to bring 2 llamas into the backyard once a week so I can go and get some touch from animals? Whatever works really, but it's you in a loving way making clear, hey, there's this thing, it's actually a need for me, and I'm not getting it met, and I'm not making you wrong. I love you, and I do need to get it met, and that's the conversation that I want to be in. You might also, I hear you say you have a rejection. You might learn how to dial down, right? It's one thing to say I'm not getting this need met. It's another that when it doesn't happen, I'm actually experiencing rejection. You might be able to go to work on that yourself, because if you really get that he is loving you in the ways that he knows how, you might be able to reinterpret that you're not actually being rejected. There's just something that's important to you that you're not getting. And I think you have to, sometimes people push back on me because I say things like, you might have to train your guy. And I don't mean that in any derogatory way. And and it's not even in a one-way way. It can work in both ways. But if I'm in relationship with you and I really don't know anything about physical touch, and it's just the last thought, and perhaps I have my own kind of aversion to it, you might have to help me. You might have to train me. You might have to introduce me to ways that feel good to me. You might have to, learn how to sit next to me on the couch and gradually teach me how to snuggle more, or you might have to learn about me that I'm only interested in touch, in certain specific situations. You might have to get my backstory on touch. Maybe my mother never touched me, or maybe my mother touched me too much and it feels intrusive, right? So I would be wanting to get into the granularity of how does touch occur to this guy? Does he have any positive references for it? Does he have wounds? Does he have things that need to be like aired and metabolized? Because then that turns it from just, there's something I'm not getting, to like, how can we as a team support one another in these things? Particularly for people who are very touchy-feely, right? So for people who, often with a stranger would be comfortable putting a hand on their shoulder or touching their arm. Or I've had experiences of people who I'm like, wow, you are too touchy-feely for me. I can be really touchy-feely, but I'm not just touchy-feely with any stranger. I'm not touchy-feely when I don't feel like I'm in rapport with someone. Being on the other end of that can feel like you're being invaded or intruded, right? And so sometimes if there's a woman that's more touchy-feely, maybe she's a little bit more, on the anxious side, say, and there's a bit more pro-contact, maybe the guy's a bit more avoidant and not very touchy-feely, you've got to calibrate to how is that landing in his world to get him as an ally, right? If you're touching him and he's actually feeling intruded upon, it's actually getting you less of the thing that you want. Maybe for him, you need to be in, 15 minutes of intellectual conversation before his system feels like it's co-regulated enough with you that he would want to touch you. I don't know, but I would get really curious there and come from a place of not blame, from I'm just needing to get my needs met. You're not wrong. How can we do this? What do you think about going out with more than one guy until one of them steps up into commitment? Yeah, I'm pretty cool with that. Whatever works. And, I think dating, it can be really fun, and, dating multiply. I think it's good to know that at a certain point, if you want exclusivity, that's what you're going to do. I don't think it's great to be, being multiply in sexual contact with people. I think that can be confusing. But I also want you to notice, if you're doing this, like, who do you actually want to be in commitment with, right? So I want you to really engage your own desire and your own intuition about what it is that you want, because sometimes people can just sort of take this as almost like a bit of an impersonal dating strategy. I'm just going to date a lot, and then if a guy wants to be with me, he can kind of step up. And some guys are more sort of sensitive than that, or that they're not the guys that are just going to break down a door to be with you necessarily. You might say, well, I only want that kind of guy. Cool, if that's true. But if you're giving a guy sort of like, yeah, this is just, I'm dating you, but I'm sort of dating all these people. Maybe it's explicit, maybe it's not, but you might actually be giving him the wrong signal. So all of that to say that if there's a guy that you actually like and you want to be in more relationship with, I would be making that clear by giving him that kind of green light, like, I want to go on more dates with you, or I'm really interested to get to know you more, I really love it when we date, please take me on another one. Don't let dating multiple people be a recipe for like showing up casual and kind of showing up without your heart. We want your heart to be in there. We don't want your heart to be too much in there, but we want your heart to be available, because there is no real authenticity without the heart. Jack is right about just saying hello too. I forced myself to go to a bar by myself and be open, and it worked. Awesome. I really like hearing that. I met a really nice person. Guys are often afraid, and to be okay to be open and friendly. Yeah, totally. Oh, excuse me. I just did a little bit of a skippy. Oh my gosh. All right, I need to pick up the pace here a little bit. For those of you that just joined us, welcome. Thanks for being here. For those of you that have been here for a while, I appreciate it. Hit the like button if you like what you're liking. It helps us get word out about this video. All right, here we go. I'm going to pick up the pace. Hi, Jack. I've been chatting with this guy 3 months. Last night he said he's planning a long vacation to see me. He lives in the USA, me in South America. Says he wants to spend a lot of time with me. Awesome. Let's see how that goes. I'm glad that you're going to be spending some time. Should give you a lot of information. If there is something that you cannot accept in a relationship, then if you see it, release that person lovingly and give yourself permission to find the right one. Yes, I think I'd call that like a partial truth. Yes, I like that. And for most of us, when we get into a real relationship, we will notice that we have some acceptance issues. I think most people find it hard to 100% of the time, 100% accept another human being. So for most of us, there are edges. Most of us find it easier to be authentic on our own than we do in connection. Right? Sometimes we feel more alive and feel more true to ourselves in connection. But if you're going to be connecting with one person exclusively over a period of time, there are probably just going to be edges. So I also think just permission to be kind of real and sober about that part of your work might be like, oh, wow, there's things that come up in me that I need to accept. There's things that come up in them that I need to accept. So there's some subtleties in that territory. Jack, how do you push past dating fatigue and irritation over online dating not leading anywhere? I think maybe just take a break. Just say, all right, okay, for the next couple of weeks, 1 month, I'm not going to do online dating because I know that I'm getting frustrated with it. And I'm going to put all my attention on offline dating. And I'm actually going to take aim. Okay, so a month, I can take a date 2 or 3 days a week. I'm going to fill my calendar. I'm going to take aim at having 10 dates offline in the next month. And in order to do that, I'm going to ask 5 girlfriends to place dates for me if they can. I'm going to say hello to that guy that I've always had a crush on at work, and I'm going to see if he wants to take me on a date. And I'm going to say hello to plenty of people after every class, course, hobby that I'm in, and I'm going to see if I can do it. So take aim at something different, kind of like mix it up, freshen it up, the energy, and stretch yourself. Like give yourself a stretch goal. Doesn't matter if you hit it, but it's that you're taking aim in the right direction. And then from that place, you may decide, wow, this offline thing is just working so well, I don't need to go back online. Or if I do go online, I'm bringing an energy that's actually an energy that works for me. Does the 20-80 rule mean that you also initiate 20% of the time? No, it doesn't. I've not applied the 80-20 in that way. My general rule is ideally the guy initiates more and that you experience his initiatory energy. But there's plenty of connections that work where that's not actually the case. You know, if you're really, and you know, maybe you have a really strong masculine yourself, or you have a really strong initiation energy. So I'm also a pragmatist, what works. But I don't apply the 80-20 rule in that way. You look great, especially your skin. Thank you. I think I think my face is thinned out a little bit, look a little bit different. People tell me I'm looking younger. But that also happens sometimes when if I have less facial hair, people always tell me I look younger. When I have less facial hair, people say, wow, you've lost weight. And I'm like, unless my facial hair weighs a substantive amount, I haven't actually lost weight. It's just a slightly different face shape. But thank you. I still have some like stuff up here that's going on with my skin. Not quite sure what that is. You're looking great, Jack. Thank you. Thank you. Handsome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm scrolling here. Sorry if I missed your question. I'm just doing my best to really pick out the questions. Lots of comments back and forth. Super appreciate that. Okay, question. I told him my true feelings after he forgot my birthday. Damn, I'm sorry about that. I know that's difficult. That would really land hard in my world. Asked him on the option of taking a break since he occupied work projects. He just ghosted me. It's been 11 days, no contact. Should I initiate contact? I don't think you should initiate contact. I think this guy is probably making himself known through his actions. And if he really wanted to reconnect with you, I think he'd be doing that. You know, if he wanted to make amends, you know, for forgetting your birthday, he could be doing that. So I don't see the need for that, you know, unless you were making a sort of just a clear declaration of like, hey, I'm being no contact with you. That would be my only probably caveat, is if you wanted to say that just because you might request no contact from him and just clarify what's happening. Would you have any classes to learn to also be a relationship coach? I think that would be a fun career. Well, it is a fun career in my experience, so I like that you're interested in that. I have, in previous existences, I have definitely trained people to be coaches. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. If more of you would be interested in that, let me know. Make a comment or drop me an email or make contact. It's definitely something I would consider. So yeah, thanks for your interest. Debbie, hi Jack, South Africa. Hey to South Africa, love what you do. That's where my wife grew up. And I'm yet to go, so I look forward to going sometime. Sorry, I missed most of this, but for your next video, can you talk a little bit about avoidant personality types? Yes, I could do that. I may well. I'm just going to take a snap of that because I keep a little running list of future topics. And if a number of you are interested in that, I can definitely do more about well, all the attachment types. Let me know. Living in sunny SoCal. Lucky you. Thanks for the feedback. You're amazing. I appreciate that. Hi from Romania. Awesome. You're welcome for the advice. This is so hard. Why guys waste so much time and out doing all this mind games for nothing? It's so silly and so hurtful. Yeah, I hear you. I know that a lot of people have an experience like that. Here's the thing, you know, your job is to notice when a guy is playing games with you and to cease and desist. So you know, yes, happy to help any guys stop playing games. The reality is that there are always going to be some guys and some women that are playing games. And you just want to say, that's not a pitch I want to play on. That's not a game I want to play. So that's where your own sobriety, your own discernment, your own wisdom, intuition, and boundaries come into play. So I'm much more interested in helping people cultivate that than I am in trying to change guys that aren't ready to change. And also sometimes guys don't consciously waste your time. Plenty of guys will, but there's plenty of guys that it's not. It's just that, they're not clear that they're actually not available for a relationship. Or sometimes the hard reality is they're not available for a relationship with you, but sometimes they are available for a relationship with someone else. So, there's lots that goes on in this space. It's more about how can you take care of yourself? How can you love yourself? How can you own your power and your boundaries, know what you want? Don't settle. Don't invest time where it doesn't make sense for you. Trust your intuition. All of that is where I would get your attention, and leave the sociological analysis of guys, that's dinner party conversation. But in terms of your dating, focus on what it is you want. You only need to meet one right guy. Plenty of guys out there that do want a relationship and are ready for it and haven't met the right person yet. So, another way in the right relationship, I spend a lot of time talking about the right guy, and that's a huge part of it. But obviously, there's a huge part that's also being the right person to be in the right relationship. Are you ready? Have you healed some of your wounds, or are you playing out the same wounds and same patterns? Have you looked back and done an inventory of your dating and noticed in relationships, like what's actually going on there? Can you distinguish what's going on? Most of us have plenty of work to do there before we get too fixated about, guys that play games. And if guys have played games with you and your heart's gotten hurt, I'm sorry. And I get that can be really tough. And, I wish you the best in healing from that. Hello from Sharon in Ohio. Yo to Ohio. Jack, if a man you're seeing takes hours to get back at times, is that breadcrumby? Congratulations on the fast. Yeah, so this is gray territory, I think, because if we were in a relationship, right, we might start to have some agreements about, we do our best to get back to each other with, a reasonable time scale. But I don't think that if you're in the early stages of dating a relationship, I don't think hours is inexcusable. And I also, sometimes I'm a fan of guys really owning their attention, and that if they are, really dealing with something in their day, or they're really focused at work, that maybe it isn't right for them to just constantly be replying to texts. I'm more interested in the consistency across time, right? I'm more interested in when we, can we spend quality time together? Am I responsive without just being like quick to get back? And, if you're often, I think probably women are sometimes better at this than men, or they're more attuned to that, or that, if you're on the anxious side, for you, what might be quick, for someone else might just be a completely unreasonable expectation, right? So you can also just check your own situation there. Do you sometimes just text people back really quickly because you feel obligated to do it, when maybe actually you're in the middle of something and it would serve you to keep your attention there? So I have more of a problem with, if it takes a day to get back to something than I do with several hours. Now, you get to have that as a deal breaker. If it really doesn't work for you, that you need a guy that can just text you back super quick. And, there are definitely people like Stan Tatkin and attachment people that say, getting back to your partner should be like the priority. But I just think there are a lot of people for whom that's just not going to be kind of true for them. So it's also kind of what works. And notice, is there an anxious or preoccupied quality to the way that you're communicating? And is that something on your side of the fence that you might want to relax? I certainly wouldn't call that that breadcrumbing. What can be nice is that you actually sometimes get substantive communication from your guy, which is not just a quick text. He might call you, he might leave you a video, he might leave you an audio message, voicemail, but there's something that's actually got a little bit more substance than just like, one or two lines of text. Good day, Jack. Does true love exist anymore, as love seems to be such a throwaway thing to a lot of people, sadly? I think true love exists, absolutely. I just might have a slightly different definition than maybe some people are holding. But I think committed love definitely exists. I think we, in some ways, an online dating contributes to this, right? We have a misery of choice because there's this plethora of options on the table, so to speak, just a click or a text or a hookup away, that wasn't really like that before. So I think sometimes people are wasting a lot of energy in that, and they can't really see the wood for the trees. But I absolutely think there are also more and more people engaging in a more conscious style of relationship, where they're using relationship to wake them up, where they're doing the work, where they're doing the work individually, where they're doing the work as a couple, where they get that relationship is this place of healing, and it shows you the places that you haven't healed. So more and more people are in that. which I think is awesome. And I think that's a particular type of loving relationship that didn't exist mostly for our grandparents and parents and previous generations, right? They were too focused on playing roles. They were too focused on economic survival. And that's not to say that economic survival is guaranteed for any of us, but it's a little different, I think, than it probably was for a significant number of us. And therefore, what we can look for a relationship, it's not quite the same survival need as it was fulfilling in the past. So I actually think there are other opportunities in love that weren't there. And again, you only need one person, right? You could meet 20 guys who are what you would call a throwaway love guy. And you only just need to meet that 21st guy that's actually like, hey, there's something here that I want to do, and you're the person I want to do it with. So don't lose faith. I think is an important part of this, and trusting the timing of the universe, that there may be some little bit that just needs to fall into place, right? It might be that it's not your time and there's a season that's coming, and that's actually on life's timeline. It might be that there's one bit, you've done a ton of work, but there's just one bit. Maybe there's still a persona that you're projecting out there, and so the right guy isn't kind of responding to that. Or maybe there's a way that you're still leading in your masculine, and you need to learn to relax that. Or maybe there's some hurt that you're carrying from previous relationships, so you've kind of detached from your heart, and that's stopping you really getting into a real connection, the hurt from the past that's unmetabolized. So keep going to work on yourself, not as like a workhorse, like I'm kind of self-flagellating that I've just got to keep working, but just keep trusting that if you're showing up, doing your work, that in right timing, if love is meant to happen, and part of love is meant to happen is that you don't get to control it, right? That's what's so frustrating for so many of us. But relationship is this place of surrender. But if you can surrender that if life is going to support this direction, it will happen. It may not happen in any timeline that you have. It may happen in someone else's timeline. That's what it is. So often when someone says something like, does true love exist? What it might mean is I have a dominant experience of frustration, and I might need to learn how to relax that frustration. Or I have a dominant experience that I can no longer trust life because I've had such a hard time here. And it's really testing my faith. And if that's the case, I want you to keep digging deeper, not being hard on yourself and critical, but keep digging deeper into your own trust and faith that something is going to come if it's meant to come for you. I super appreciate your clarity. Thank you. It's doing my best. Sarah says I have the same frailties as you. I appreciate that. I hope you're working sensitively with them. Can you be exclusive but not in a committed relationship, such as someone who wants to date indefinitely but not have any milestones? Yeah, I think so. I mean, as long as two people are signing up for that, there definitely are people that have this sort of more, they sort of almost experience it as more of a spiritual kind of moment to moment, like every day we get up and if we say yes, we say yes. That's cool. It sometimes can just lack ground, right? Like for some of us to feel safe, we sometimes need to know that we're actually both kind of looking at this as like a committed thing. But if two people don't have that need, then yeah, absolutely. And there can be some really interesting developmental territory that happens in those relationships. Maybe they're just not the ones where you buy a house together or co-parent or integrate your families. They're sometimes a little bit more like their own, perhaps, bubbles, perhaps. If you ask a very personal question here, could it potentially be seen by the person I'm asking about or even searchable by email address? So if you ask a question here, the text can be seen. It might therefore be able to be searchable. I don't think it would be searchable by email address, but I don't know that for certain. So if in doubt, I would either ask it anonymously, like under an anonymous profile, or you can DM me on Instagram. I don't answer every question I get on Instagram, but I do answer some of them if I can. Being exclusive is with setting intention and direction. Well, being exclusive can mean whatever it means actually to two people. So if you're going to be exclusive and you have some assumptions that being exclusive means this relationship's going somewhere, whilst being exclusive is a good sort of indicator on the path, often I wouldn't assume that, because sometimes people want to be exclusive because they're very conscious of their sexual health, or for them to feel like they can be sexual, they need to have some exclusivity, but they may not be in a situation where they're actually really ready for a long-term committed relationship. Sometimes people can be hugely serial monogamous. So they're only ever exclusive, but it doesn't mean they're hanging around necessarily. So again, minimum assumption, maximum curiosity. Yvette, I'm still here. Just love listening to you. I'll have to head off to work shortly though. Oh, awesome. Thanks. I appreciate you being here, and have a great day at work. which is tomorrow, right? Monday already. I'm so glad you touched the topic of unhealthy attachments. He's not your guy. He's just noise. Hearing it every time. It's not working with you guys. Thanks for that. We love you. Awesome. I appreciate it. Jack, I really have a question I'd like to get your advice on. I've watched a couple of videos and I'm truly enjoying the question is in the next messages if there's not enough space. Okay, I'll see if I can come to that. Hi, Jack. You look well. Lynn, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for your support as well. Stacey says, I'm a highly religious and I'm pursuing becoming a youth pastor. For me, that is a huge factor in commitment. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, just encouragement to own whatever is really important to you as a factor in commitment. How to know if it's his attachment style versus not interested? Well, so even if you're avoiding attachment, I think over time, you normally make it clear that you're interested in someone. You may not show up as interested as the other person or as the other person if they're anxious. But I still think you sort of make it clear, like, yeah, I kind of want you to be my boyfriend or girlfriend. I think there's plenty of avoidant people, who go there and beyond. It just might be that they don't turn to the relationship for the same way of, if I'm having a hard day and stress, they might not turn to the relationship first. They might turn to themselves. So I actually think those things are probably distinguishable. I think if a guy's not interested, then you should take him as not interested and not assume there's avoidant attachment. He can come back to the table with more. He can come back and say, hey, this is not that I'm not interested in my avoidant attachment, but I wouldn't be making any assumptions about that. Francesco, greetings from Italy. Ciao. My current boyfriend and I are becoming serious, and within my prayers, I know that this relationship is the right one to pursue. We're both aware of who we are internally by ourselves. It's going wonderful. Awesome. Love it. Love that there's a relationship that's going well. He was in a major car crash in hospital. I've known that I love him since November 22nd, would have stayed quiet due to a psycho-abusive relationship. I stayed away from all dating for 3.5 years. Well, I'm glad you know that you love him. That's awesome. Lucy, Sunday with schoolwork, studying and listening to Jack. I'm glad that I might be a distraction or a break from some hard studying on a Sunday. I told her I loved him after the car crash because I knew I'd regret it if I did something worse and hadn't yet. Totally get that. I know guys have a longer time coming to love, but how long should I wait before I know whether or not he will decide to make the true commitment to be with me for good? Well, again, sobriety, not too much, not too little, right? So we don't wait 10 years, but we also just don't wait 2 months. Somewhere in the middle. For most of us, I think if we're really serious about relationship and it's a time that we can step into something more serious, I think for a lot of us, we tend to know within 1 to 2 years. Now, again, that's not a hard and fast. Nothing about this is going to, I'm giving you a sort of concretized thing. It's not going to be as powerful as your own intuition, authentic conversation with him, reflection from other people. But I think for most of us to know that we really want commitment, it's not just months, but it's also not, so many years and into a decade. Sometimes you've been with a guy 5 years and you want it and you actually need to sort of put it out there that like, look, I really do want to be married, or I really do. And sometimes that is, again, it's a threshold conversation for him to move through. But if he's really like, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know, I don't see this, I want to keep it casual, and it's been years, I think you have to move on if you want something more committed. When I'm out of connection, I realize all the red flags, but when he reconnects, I definitely seem to forget these easily because he's so nice. Totally. Sometimes that's just like realizing, well, where do you cultivate objectivity and sobriety? And sometimes we cultivate objectivity and sobriety when we're on our own. That's the same thing in some ways as saying, I'm more sober and objective than, when I go in the bar and I have a bunch of drinks, I'm a little bit less sober and objective. But knowing that, I can sometimes, as long as that's not an addiction of mine, I can make better choices. So sometimes you have to know, oh, if I'm actually seeing it more truly when I'm not in connection with him, maybe I just need to be out of connection, point, full stop, period, and going no contact, because going back into connection, I'm asking myself, it's like I don't have that muscle. I don't have that willpower. So that's another part of sobriety, is sometimes knowing like, sobriety in another context might be, unless I get to the gym, I don't work out. So I actually have to go to the gym. But I know that if I go to that restaurant, I'm going to eat a whole pile of food I don't want to eat. So I just don't go to that restaurant. If I know that, he's so seductive or alluring that I can't actually hold my truth around him. Maybe I just don't want to be in contact for my own self-love. What about long distance relationship? I'm not sure if there's an actual question there. Thank you, Jack. I love your view on being authentic and true to your heart and dating. You're welcome. Thanks. How to overcome loneliness. I'll answer that. I'll also say, if you want to support this live stream, this channel, my work here, and the ability to keep doing these ongoing, there is a facility that you might see called Super Chat, where you're able to send a donation to the channel. If you hit that button, it just pops up with a screen where you put in your details, your payment details, and that sends it over. So if any of you want to do that, you're welcome. That's one way of supporting this channel. I appreciate it. So how do you overcome loneliness? Well, two parts. The first part is you cultivate relationship with yourself. Now, that can seem strange if you're not used to it or if you've never really figured it out. If you don't, one of the hardest things about any of this kind of work is that when I or anyone else says something, it lands in your reality in a certain way, and we may or may not have shared reality about it, right? So when I say healing, that means something. I remember when I first moved to Boulder, Colorado, 8-9 years ago now, everyone was talking about healing. This experience was so healing. I need healing. I want to go to my healer. And it was kind of seemed a bit OTT, over the top to me. I didn't really get it. And then at some point, just after a long enough time, I was like, oh, I get it. I actually get it in a different way. Now, it might be that some people overuse that word, right? So if you're trying to understand, okay, so the antidote to loneliness is self-love, is presence with yourself, is relationship with self. That's part of it, is actually going deeper with yourself. And you may or may not hear that in the way that I understand it in my own life. And there's not so much we can do about that. Just to say, if you keep hearing that and you're like, maybe there's something more there, just stay open to the possibility that there's something more. So some of the ways that you can spend time with yourself is the exact same thing. If I said, how do you attend to other people, right? Well, you give them your attention. Can you give yourself your attention, right? You're really curious about them. Can you be really curious about yourself? You comfort them when they're not feeling well. Can you comfort yourself when you're not feeling well? These are some of the things that the more you cultivate them, it's not to say that you'll never feel lonely, but you might fear it less. And it might be more like, wow, that's an authentic experience in my palette of emotions. Then it's a sort of debilitating, consistent thing. You learn how to distinguish aloneness from loneliness. If you want more on this, I actually have a video. I don't know the exact name off the top of my head, but it has loneliness in the title, like, help I feel alone, or how can I feel less lonely? So go find that video, because I do a deeper dive on what I've just said there. The other thing is, putting things in your life that are meaningful, right? Most of us feel more, less lonely when we're heart connected, so how much authentic connection do you have from your heart, with other humans, friends, dates, pets, dependents, parents, old people, young people, like, can you fill your other tanks? John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, talks about love tanks. And I think it's a really useful concept. It was powerful for me when I first discovered it. There's a self-love tank, but there's also a dependent love tank. There's also a romantic love tank. There's also plenty of other love tanks, friend love tanks. Fill as many as you can, and you'll find yourself being a bit less lonely. But realize that loneliness could be an important part of your path, even if it's difficult, to actually really face it, so that you don't have to be afraid of loneliness, so that you can get to the point where you're like, wow, I'm going to have some time on my own and I'm actually looking forward to it. Or, wow, I'm having some time on my own. Sure, I have a preference right now if someone wanted to connect with me. Or, I'm feeling lonely. Let me reach out. And what I want is connection. So let me cultivate connection. Let me message someone. Let me make a plan. Let me call a long lost friend. So those would be my starter places. But check that video out if you haven't watched it. Read your book, watched your videos, got my guy back. Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. I love hearing that. One question. My guy says he wants to have sex with other women, but on the 3 years we've been together, he never had. Why do you think he says that? So I'm curious if he said that to you from a place of like sort of vulnerability and presence, or if he said that to you kind of in argument or anger. but I'm going to assume for the sake of argument that it's authentic. I think a lot of guys can imagine being sexual with more than one woman, partly because sometimes being sexual isn't actually an emotional thing. It can be a physical thing. So, a lot of guys, even if they're in a committed relationship, it doesn't stop them feeling sexually attracted to a lot of other women. And then the question is, are they able to kind of just accept that that's a desire, but there's no actual, need to act on it? Or is there something that actually is like, wow, they actually feel like they have to act on it? And in case, does that actually work in the context of being in a committed relationship with you? Because that could be obviously just a straight deal breaker for you. I would be, I'd be curious to explore it, actually, not the being sexual elsewhere, but to explore the conversation and to find out what does he mean by that? Is he just letting you know that he's, sometimes turned on when he's looking at other women, or is he letting you know that he's actually wanting a kind of polyamorous relationship? I think there's a lot of men that if their woman was really comfortable and happy and okay that they would occasionally have sex with other people, I think there's a lot of men that would go for that, because for them they're able to separate that the person I feel committed to, or the person that I have more like emotional and heart-based sex, might be different than the person that I is more like a kind of like a hot model that I feel attracted to. They kind of put them in different places. So I don't actually think that that's the desire is that uncommon. I think it's just more about the healthy way of being with that and communicating and having agreements if they need to be in place, or that you're just clear, yeah, that's just not something that's going to ever be appropriate in our relationship. And you still may want to have a situation where it's okay for your guy to say, hey, I was in the store earlier and I felt attracted to someone, but it's actually okay. It's okay to be real about that. And people vary. Some people are like, look, I never want to hear that. I just want to know that you're going to be faithful to me. And sure, if you occasionally attract to someone else, fine, but I don't want to hear about it. So again, whatever works. I'm on a dating site and talking to different guys who've been married for 30 years, and now these men want to hook up. This all scares me. How do I know if I can believe them? Well, if a guy says you want to hook up, I would believe him. I think you're saying, how do you find a trustworthy guy? And I think you have to meet people in person generally, or be in real time with them, because I think there's something about trust that has to do with nervous systems and being able to dial your intuition. So I wouldn't be too afraid to move a conversation onto another platform, do it in a way that's safe, do it with a Google Voice number if you need, do it in a, if you're meeting in person, obviously do it in daylight, go for coffee or lunch in a public place. You'll know there's an animal in you that actually knows. The question is normally there's other things that get in the way, like your doubt. And if you're like, I don't really know about this guy, if you're having a lot of doubts about a guy, and I would just move on. Like if you've only exchanged a few texts and you're already kind of, there's alarm bells, I would just move on. My husband and I are currently separated. I'm trying my best to mend the relationship. I make the most effort to bring him back, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do if he seems to value me less. I mean, again, I would go for what's really true and in your heart. You can't really determine how much someone values you. A lot of us have wounds around our own value. If you have questions about your own value, check out a video in the thumbnail. It says start valuing yourself, because learning how to relax our own need to be valued in certain ways can actually be really part of our own path and our own development. But if you're taking a stand for something that you love, as long as you're not, allowing bad behavior on his part, that he doesn't have to put anything to the relationship, or he's spending his time connecting with other women and not you, he's your husband. Like, you guys, there's something to fight for there often, and if you're fighting for it to see if there's still something there, do it. And, at least if it doesn't work out, you can look back and say, I gave it my all. I think that's really important. Is there any way I can make my marriage stronger since my husband is on deployment? Wow, I feel for you. I know that can be hard. I would just encourage you to cultivate rituals of connection between you. I've never been in the military, so it's not a context I know a huge amount about, but like what has you guys feel really connected? Like, can you make videos for one another? Is it important that you actually can put aside real time, FaceTime, video time conversations? Is it that you make immaculate plans when you can be together? Can you write longhand letters? I'm sure maybe that still happens in military context. Like, I'd really be having conversations about what are the things that most have you guys feel connected when you're physically separate. Sometimes that can be just, knowing that we're really on each other's minds and we let us know that a lot. I'd really want to know love languages. I think that's even more important probably in long distance connections. And that you're also, filling your own bucket so that you're getting a lot of your needs kind of met, that you're still in connection with the right other people. Maybe there are paths of work. I don't know if that's a context in your relationship, but if you're doing inner work together, right? Let's say attachment's a body of work, right? Polarity, it's a body of work. Dealing with conflict, it's a body of work. There are all sorts of themes. Basically, if you guys knew that, even if we're apart, there's both some things that we're kind of working on, comparing notes. Sometimes that can work for people. That, he's going to take a bunch of reading material, you're going to take the same reading material. So when you do talk, you've got things that you have in common that you're actually working in the background. Good luck with it, though. Good luck with that. I think it's important. You've helped me tremendously in deciphering men, says Tatiana. I needed to know what to look for in your videos. Help me distinguish the problems stemming from the guys and my own. It just moved on me. Apologies. Your videos help me in distinguishing the problems stemming from the guys and my own before making my call. Awesome. Glad I've helped. Early on, I'm more fearful in romantic relationships and more secure and a bit anxious with family friends. Have you seen help fearful, avoiding people become more secure and have healthy relationship? Yes, I have, and I've seen it. And, this actually works in both directions, right? One of the important things about attachment is, can you see the gifts of the other attachment style? So when you really get that there is a gift in what the anxious person has, which is that when they have dysregulation or there's stuff up, their first thought is connecting with other people for support. Can you see that there's a gift there? And can you really practice that? And can you notice that you're anxious, as your avoidant attachment is a survival strategy, right? It was necessary. Maybe you grew up in an environment where you had to be self-reliant. Maybe you had absent parents, neglectful parents, unpredictable parents, weak parents, parents that had a different love language and you didn't feel loved by them. Whatever that is there, can you notice that attachment style is an adaptive, strategic behavior for safety. And so that's great that you have this particular attachment style. It's served you well. It's helped you survive your childhood. That's awesome. And now you're going to go to work on relaxing that, right? And a big way of being able to relax something is to start to see the benefits in the thing that's the opposite, the thing that you've pushed away from for so long. Also, I think just giving yourself time. This is not a quick play. This is like months and years. And just what are the little ways every day that you could lean a little bit into your relationship? Let the person know that they mean something to you. If they supported you, let them know that you felt supported. Just if you feel anxious, if you feel insecure, could one time you just risk dropping a voice note or making a call to your partner? It's small things built up over a long period of time. Could you notice that maybe inside your avoidant isn't anxious, that if you really, really stripped it back, that there's a fear of intimacy there, that you might actually become really dependent? Can you realize that, there is such a thing as healthy dependence, right? That not all dependence is bad. Part of you might think that all dependence is bad because based in the past, maybe it was. So there are some starter thoughts. Candy, sent a little something to your PayPal. Thank you so much. I super, super appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you to all of you that have supported this channel, either through the super chat or through PayPal. I super appreciate it. It makes a difference. And it allows me to ultimately put more time here, which if I'm serving you and it's filling me up, that's a good thing. My partner had 6 months relationship with someone local to him. We live 2 hours apart and meet Friday to Sunday. We're now rebuilding, but every time he goes back home, I feel insecure. How do I overcome this? So one way to answer that question could be, how do we overcome this? Right? People have a right to their insecurity. Ideally, we can share our insecurity in a way that doesn't make the other person wrong. I know that can be hard to do, and I know that I personally have not been always good at this. But how can we overcome this, right? Because we are trying to create a secure relationship, if that's actually, what we're trying to do. So, what about if at some point you guys restructure your calendar so that actually Maybe you do see each other in the week. Maybe one of you can do a remote day of working, right? Or maybe one of you can actually lose a little bit of sleep and that you need to drive through the night, right? So maybe there are some actual things that you can do to shift up the dynamic of how much you connect. Maybe you need to have explicit permission to say, hey, I'm feeling a little insecure, and that you can share that. And maybe that he might learn how to give you reassurance, So I think there are lots of possibilities there. I say the same thing about jealousy. Jealousy running riot is not pretty and a good thing, but not all jealousy is bad. There are adaptive evolutionary reasons for feeling insecure and feeling jealous. They actually have us protect our relationship, and our relationships sometimes need protecting. We sometimes need to be real that there are threats to our relationships and actually be able to include and talk about those things. So all of that to say that, your insecurity isn't just a bad thing. I know it's not nice to feel insecure. Again, if you feel insecure, I have another video on that about feeling insecure. So go check that out. But I would like to see if there's a way that you can enlist each other's support in this. Maybe that he can be your ally in this. Or maybe if he is going to have any contact with this person, maybe there's a way that he can give you a heads up. Either like, hey, would you be okay if I called this person? And you might be yes, no, maybe, counter offer, or if he has had contact with them, that he lets you know within a day, right? So you can set up agreements that can also help you feel more safe. And ideally, if you're not blaming the guy, if he can never be with your insecurity, right? If he always makes you wrong for it, if there's no way to ever talk about it, he might not be your guy. Because if you are prone to some insecurity, or if you're prone to insecurity in relationship with a particular guy, and he's got no interest in that, that's really difficult, right? That ideally, as guys, we get that one of our main jobs is helping you feel safe and secure. Now, we might be terrible at it, or times, I can be inadvertently creating insecurity for my partner. Like, that's totally possible. But in my sober, centered self, I care enough that if you feel insecure, that this is a place that you can turn, and that you have an ability to be included on the dial, right? That you, as the partner, get to be able to turn down the dial on my connection with an ex, because that protects our relationship. And if I'm never open to that, or modifying my behaviors, and I only push you away and make you wrong, that is not a pro-social behavior. That is not a pro-relationship behavior. And as a guy, I might be in the wrong there. Now, we might have to negotiate a little bit. You might say, hey, you always have to tell me if you're going to have contact with your ex. And it might be, well, actually, maybe more appropriate, maybe they called me and I took the call, and I don't actually have to not take the call, but I just have to let you know that day or once the call's over. So there's plenty of push and pull in this, but let's find something that has us both feeling more secure. That's surely got to be the aim in relationship. Abe Star, greetings from North Devon. From April, North Devon. Awesome. It's a very pretty part of the world. Lucky you. Thank you, Jack. Everything you say is spot on. Thank you. I look forward to reading your bestseller one day. Thank you. I have to get you to write it. No, I do like writing. And at some point, I imagine writing a book. I will leave it up to the universe and people who are probably better at marketing than I am to work out if that would ever be a bestseller. But I appreciate the sentiment of that. That's super sweet. Michelle says, great questions today. What did you call the areas that can begin showing that need our attention? What did you call the areas that can begin showing that need our attention in us when triggered? Are those in your free video? Well, I called them probably something like wounds, or outdated survival strategies, or defenses. Right? Generally, they're the things that relationship will show up for us, and that there's an opportunity to discover. Cheryl, and how would those same men feel about the woman wanting to have sex with someone else? In my experience, they wouldn't feel good about it. Yes, I think there's some truth in that. I don't think that generally guys feel great about that. And that in some ways, and it's probably above my pay grade to really know everything that goes on there. But, that might be an inconsistency, right? That might be like, oh, I want something for myself and not something for you. I don't think you need to go for an arrangement that has anything different about who gets to do what. Sometimes it works for people to say, hey, yeah, like there's something else that we're able to include. If you're going down that route, I definitely think you want to be doing it on the back of we have a really secure relationship. Because I think if you start to introduce other things, that's, I've just seen it go so badly, and people just, all sorts of fun and games happening under the, you shouldn't be jealous banner, rather than the, do we actually make each other feel safe here? So yeah, I'm just saying that the fact that the guy might have that desire, that might just, there might be something authentic in that, and to maybe be a place where that can be explored rather than a place with you. Not that anything actually has to happen, but that it could be okay to include that if that's true for him. My wife's here. Greetings from Totnes, Devon. I hope you're enjoying it, hun. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. You were very on point with a lot of what he said. I'm not interested in polyamory, and he knows that. I don't care if he makes occasional comments. I'm confident in my self-worth. Awesome. Anna Catamol, super chat from Bristol with love. Super appreciate that. Thank you. So generous. Thank you. Wow, you were 3 hours with us today. Happy to check my PayPal for you. Have a good rest. I would go nuts if I spoke for 3 hours long. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm just a nut job and you never realize. I appreciate it. I mean, there's a lot of energy for him. The questions are great. They challenge me. They have me thinking. So I appreciate it. And I super appreciate you getting on the PayPal. Thank you so much. I'm chatting with this guy, 3 months. He's 54. Me too. He's in California. Me in South America. He said he's finding long vacation. What does it mean? I mean, it probably means that he wants to see you. It might mean that you guys have built up some expectations and some fantasy, right? Often if we chat, sometimes how we experience someone over text and email can be very different than the visceral, heart, in-person experience of connection. So I think it's great that you're coming to hang out. I just wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't go too heavy in that, right? I would want to kind of meet in the same way that maybe I'm dating someone. Like, yeah, they come to your area, you go for lunch. And if you like it, you go for another date. But you don't necessarily plan to like spend, a few weeks together unless that really intuitively feels right to you. So sometimes I've seen these things that it's like we don't really know much about each other. And actually when we get together, there's nothing really there, or it's kind of different, or it goes from being under to suddenly, boom, we're kind of like completely immersed in each other and it's a bit too much. So I don't know what it means. I just think that sometimes when people have never met, it's hard for them to have realistic expectation. And I think guys are guilty of this. Guys who, text, and they are, ready to get together at some point, but what they want to happen when they get together is a little bit inappropriate for the level of actual connection that you have. Leanne, thank you, Jack, for your advice and insights. You are welcome. His offshore contract lasts 2 to 10 months. He's voiced he wants to see his 16-year-old son daily with this new friendship we're building. Should I tell him my desire for him to be onshore versus offshore? So I'm curious if you're actually in a committed relationship. If you are, absolutely. If you're not, excuse me, I think you could, but I'd be curious if you actually want to cultivate relationship to the point where making a request for onshore would kind of make sense. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's an important desire. It's a tricky space sometimes. You don't want to come between a guy and his career, right? Ideally, you want to align with it, but it might be that there are adjustments that can be made, right? Or it might be that there's some balance between onshore and offshore, that if he gets an ability to determine that maybe he can shift his schedule, or maybe that when he is onshore, there's a certain priority that's spent on the relationship and that you guys have some agreement that feels good. Another enlightening conversation. Have a nice week. Thanks so much. I'm glad you found it enlightening. Hi, Jack. I have no contact with an ex who's in love with someone else. At work, I'm fine, but when I'm home, I just want to unblock him and say hi. What advice do you have not to do this? So I would encourage you to think about what a substitute behavior can be, right? So just in the same way that if we smoke and we want to give it up, we start taking mints. Every time we go to smoke, we take a mint. So every time you think you're going to unblock him, why don't you reach out to someone that you can have connection with, right? Why don't you call a girlfriend? Or if you've got professional support, maybe there's someone you could reach out to there. Or maybe you're like, every time you go to do that, you actually just leave the house and walk around the block, or take yourself off to the gym or the cinema. So I think you can just reorient that energy. Because if he's in love with someone else, it's like, yeah, we can have all sorts of urges, right? All sorts of desires. They just don't necessarily serve us. And part of being a mature human is that we notice that not every desire needs to be fulfilled. I'd also probably delete him so that it's not even an block thing. It's like, it's kind of gone. And then it's just, it's much less tempting. I would also disconnect on social media so that you're not like being reminded of him, sort of seeing his social media activity. I would just make it easier for you. You might have heard this expression. This is coarse language, so forgive me, but it says that It's called 99% a bitch, 100% a breeze. And it basically means when you're trying to change a habit, it's much easier to go all in than to have these little exceptions, because they completely can erode your willpower and self-discipline. So with no contact, but just with a little occasional contact, really, really hard. Absolute no contact, normally easier. Absolute no contact with well thought through substitute behaviors and cultivating a network of support, and maybe letting people know I'm no contact with my ex and sometimes I have an urge to be back in contact. Could you be someone that I reach out to when that happens? That's probably the more mature path. Appreciate you, Jack, for your altruism and dedication of sharing your wisdom. You are so welcome. Give this a like if you haven't given it a like. I am going to wrap up here. I got to the bottom of the questions. Thanks for challenging me. I appreciate all the questions, all the love, all the support. If you haven't downloaded my guide, download my guide. It will put you on my mailing list where I email exclusive things and people hear about things prior to other people hearing about things. Join me on Instagram if you haven't. If you want to support the channel, you can send a super chat here. That will be open so long as this is live. But after the event, if you want to support it, or now, you can head over to my PayPal and make a donation. Any donation, whatever it is, $1, $5, $10, any of that just helps support this channel and put momentum behind this work. Grateful as always for all the questions and comments. If you've joined us after the event, thanks so much for being here. For those of you that stayed the whole time, awesome. I love it. For those of you that joined us recently, thanks for doing so. And I will look forward to being with you soon. Just to drop a thought into your reality, I will be organizing at least one retreat, I imagine, later this year. So if you want to come and spend some high quality in-person time with me, start thinking about maybe whether that's something that you want to do. Definitely, if you're interested in that, download the free guide, because it will put you on my mailing list, and this will go out to my mailing list before it goes out to other people. If you are interested in working with me one-on-one, here's the link. You can apply for coaching. I'm currently full right now, but I will be making new openings, and these are the people that I go to first. And they're also the people I go to when I open up one-to-one strategy sessions. So get yourself on that list, because it will mean that I come to you first before I come to other people. Thanks for all the well wishes. I appreciate wherever you're tuning in from across the world. I know we've had Australia, New Zealand. I know we've had plenty of people from Canada, the States, Europe, UK. Europe, UK. You see, we're in a post-Brexit reality. There we go. We'll always be part of Europe. So thanks so much for being here. I'm going to love and leave you. Have a great rest of your days, and I wish you all the best for the week ahead. All right, guys. Peace.